Welcome to the City Council meeting on this Tuesday, July 8th. Let's go ahead and start with roll call.
Mayor Coombs. Mayor Pro Tem Bagley.
Here.
Council members Christensen. Here. Finley. Here. Levison. Here. Moore. Here. Santos. Here. Mayor Pro Tem, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Those of you who are wondering why I'm behind the mic, obviously the mayor's not here. He couldn't make it tonight. You don't need to worry. He'll be back next time. There's not been a coup. Yet. Yes, thank you. Yet. Chair's reminder to the public, anyone wishing to speak at first call, public invited to be heard, will need to add his or her name to the list outside council, outside the chambers there. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at the first public invited to be heard. Speakers who do not place their names on the list will have the opportunity to speak during public hearing items this evening or at the end of final call, public invited to be heard at the end of the meeting. Shall we go ahead and approve the minutes? We got the pledge yet? Yeah, why don't we go ahead and start with pledge? That's good. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry, that Mexican trip got to my head. Now we can go ahead and approve the minutes. Can we have a motion?
I actually have my light on, and you can call on me. And
go ahead, Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Bagley. I'd like to move the minutes of the last meeting. Approval of the minutes?
Great. I guess we have a second as well.
Yeah, we have a second.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote. Bonnie, you want to vote?
Sure.
Great. All right, it passes with the mayor and abstention. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the public invited to be heard. I don't have the list, though.
Actually, we need to go over some agenda revisions before we do that, if that's all right.
Great.
We need to add a special presentation as item 6B. It will be a special achievement in GIS award to the City of Longmont and Lisa Shirts. We also need to pull agenda item 9C, which is the IGA regarding Great Outdoors Colorado Trust. That's coming back at a later meeting. And then I need to just remind you that there was an updated redlined intergovernmental agreement with Boulder County for item 9D that was sent out to you and placed in your Dropboxes and also on the web. That's it.
All right, thank you. So we go ahead and have the, let's see here. Actually, city manager's report. Should we start with that? No comments? Mr. Dominguez?
No report, Mayor, Council.
No report. And let's go ahead and have the Longmont Area Economic Council come up and provide their quarterly report.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Bagley and council members. I'm Wendy Nafziger with the Longmont Area Economic Council. Do I have to give my address and place? 1530 Peterson Place, if you care. I didn't know if my gentlemen were still behind me, sorry. So I am here tonight as a part of our contract for services with the City Council to do a report on our first half of the year. Since the first quarter we didn't have this part of our report, part of our contract, so now we'll be doing a verbal report quarterly to council of our contract for services. I'm just going to give you some highlights tonight, and as I promised Councilman Bagley earlier, this will be a full bells and whistles report in the next quarter. I just didn't have time to put a bunch of stuff together right now. I have a lot going on. So one of the main subjects of our contract, obviously, is primary employer retention. I wanted to let you know that we do a survey of our primary employers annually, as you all know. I have a volunteer group that does that, a nationally recognized volunteer group who we're very proud of. We contact 182 of those primary employers, 68% completion rate, 134 were surveyed. A final report will be sent to council after our board reviews that in August. I'm sorry it wasn't available tonight, but they have to see it first. During this quarter, we visited with 25 of our employer companies, and what's really exciting about that is 18 of those visits were included city staff, from the mayor to Harold to Sean, and mostly Sean and I are on most of them together. And the primary employers are really excited about the partnership with the city, and they're always glad to see us all together and working together as a close partnership. We also met during this first 6 months. We have a city executive leadership team, and it includes the mayor and Harold and Sean and myself and Andy Bade, who is our chairman, and Dave Humanick, who is our vice chairman. And what we've been doing is meeting with our larger employers in town just to touch base, kind of a digital globe follow-up to make sure we don't have another one of those happen to us, that if we can prevent it. So we met with Intrado and Circle Graphics during these first 6 months with great meetings, working with both of those companies on several different items for their, not only for expansion in Longmont, but other things that they had brought up that they were looking to do. We also met with Digital Globe. Yes, we did meet with Digital. Yeah, we met with Digital Globe. I'm sorry, the last 6 months have been kind of crazy. And so that's doing well. We have a great relationship with them. Sean and I actually saw the CEO of Digital Globe at an event who went out of his way to come speak to both of us as city and community representatives. And so it was very encouraging that they're still a partner in this community and still a major employer. So we still work with them. Excuse me. Through the first 2 quarters of this year, we have had, and you all received this report, but 6 new primary employers relocate into our town, or not relocate, but locate, resulting in 93 new jobs. We also had 33 of our existing primary employers add 214 new jobs. So job creation's on the rise. We're very, very happy to announce that. The next portion of our contract is primary employer recruitment. And of course, this will all transition and include small business as we move forward, as you know. Currently, we have 28 active prospects, so 28 active companies that we're working with that are looking at expanding or relocating to Longmont. We have announced 5 project expansions or new locations that the city and the Economic Council worked with directly, which were All Source Analysis, GE Lighting, Two Moms in the Raw, MDA Systems, and Lightwave Logic. So our work is paying off. We've also been working as a community, as a partnership with the community, all kinds of community members on the entrepreneurship programs in Longmont, looking at how we're going to move forward with entrepreneurship and revitalize those programs. That's in the works, but it's just been really exciting to have the city, the private sector, the Tinker Mill, the Economic Council, all kinds of different people with a lot of great, cool ideas that we'll be putting together over the next few months to try to revitalize our entrepreneurship efforts and keep those entrepreneurs in Longmont and growing. Finally, the collaboration part of our contract. Obviously, we are working on the implementation plan of our target industry analysis. Sean actually has that out to the partner groups. We all got together and met and went over all of the specific items that are going to happen now, the implementation plan. So we are putting that together. We had some, you're really going to do this and I'm really going to do that kind of thing, and we're putting that together. We'll be rolling that out. And what we'll be doing is in September, we'll be inviting all of the boards of directors and the city council to an event, if you will, rolling out that plan, showing buy-in from all the boards and the city as a community that this is the plan for the community and we're rolling forward with it and we're all in it together. So watch for that. I also wanted to mention another exciting thing that happened. I got contacted, and thank you to Councilman Levison, because I think that's who this came from, but I got invited to meet with Carolyn Himes, and she is with the CU Office of Collaboration. We have been waiting for something like this for years and years and years. She is actually a person at CU. They've put together an office of, if there's anyone in the community, business, employer, personal citizen, anyone that wants to do something with CU, we now have someone we can go to. If you're looking to hire an intern, CU is a big organization, and it's hard to know who to go to. If you're looking to hire an intern, if you're looking to do tech transfer with some of your products, if you have a product you want tested, or you have test products that they may have that their engineering students or whatever are doing. So I was really excited to meet with her and know that there's a point person at CU. So we're looking forward to moving forward with that partnership as well. And we've started basic, obviously, right now with some links on our website, but we'll be promoting that as well. Those are really the highlights, if you will, of the report that you all received and was in the council packets. I would like to, I don't know if you want me to do questions now, or if I would like to invite Andy Bade, who's the chairman of our board, to come up as well. So maybe we'll start with that and then go with questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, good evening. Council members, good evening. I wanted to add on to Wendy's first quarterly report, which will be the first of several, many coming up, to give you a quick update on where we're at with recruiting our president. We felt that was an appropriate thing to bring you up to speed on. I'm happy to report that our recruiting organization is on board and has begun advertising for the position. And they've reported, although we have not seen the names yet, they reported that they're actually pleasantly surprised with the response they're getting. We're getting a robust response of highly qualified candidates, and we anticipate that the search committee, which is a part of the board and has city representation as well, will be seeing those names by the end of the month. We'll go through our interview process at that point, and then we anticipate having the position of the president office filled by the end of quarter three. So that will allow us to bring that on board. The other recruiting effort that's a little bit behind that is the recruiting effort around the new responsibilities that came to LEC as part of our contract agreement that actually was when I last spoke to you all. We anticipate that that'll be running a little bit behind the president, and in fact our intention is to allow the president to complete that hire as part of his own organization. But we do anticipate that'll be a couple months behind the Q3 timeframe. But other than that, myself and Wendy are here to then answer any questions for your report, or for our report.
Questions or comments from council? I guess silence means you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
All right.
And we will look forward to that awesome report.
Thank you.
Next quarter.
It's going to be awesome next quarter, I promise. And I misstated earlier. I apologize. It was Polly that gave Caroline Himes our contact, but it doesn't matter. It's just an exciting, great thing that's going to be happening for the community. Thank you for your support.
No, thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and address that Special Achievement Award.
Mayor Coombs, I believe that Jeremiah Lindman, is that correct, from Esri is here, and Sandy will introduce this item.
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, members of council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. And I certainly apologize for whatever ended up happening on the agenda, and I appreciate you taking the time today to listen to Jeremiah's presentation. He's here from Esri. Esri is one of the leading GIS providers for communities, cities, well, pretty much everyone in the world, I will say. And so I'd like to introduce Jeremiah, who's going to talk a little bit about the future of GIS. You may have received an email from him earlier. If you have your iPad with you, he's going to actually help demonstrate one of the new apps that Esri is putting out there. And we're happy to help with that. Rigo's here and Jim is here as well. One thing I do just want to quickly mention is that our GIS efforts in the city are a team effort, and you're going to see lots of people today. We are going to highlight Lisa Schertz, who's our GIS coordinator, but there are an awful lot of people who do GIS work in the city, and so I'll name them all at the end of Jeremiah's presentation, and we'll take a quick photo. So let me turn it over to Jeremiah.
Thanks, Sandy. Good evening, Council. So I have a few things I'm going to show you. Just go through some slides real quick about who Esri is and GIS, what GIS is. So we're a software company. We develop GIS software. GIS is Geographic Information Systems. Basically software that allows you to make better decisions. We think anything that you do has a spatial component. How is something going to impact your neighbors? And what type of building you're going to be doing. We're a global company. We're actually headquartered in California with the distributors all over the world. I actually am from the Denver regional office, which is in Broomfield. It's just down the street. We have about 85 people. We cover about 5 states. I lead the technical branch for our sales team, working with cities and counties and state government. So our users are our highest priority. We work with them. We're not a publicly traded company. We're private. So I think that lets us work with our users a lot more and understand their challenges, like what we do with the Longmont. We've been around for over 40 years. I've been with Esri for 13 years myself, and I really enjoy it. In the past, GIS has been this kind of black box thing that you get the software and you have to figure out how to use it, and someone's going to be a GIS professional. And there's still going to be GIS professionals that work and steward the data. But we're also starting to grow our software that meets specific needs, just like the way City of Longmont works. So there's specific needs in the Public Works Department or the Emergency Management. And we're building maps and applications that let you help make better decisions based upon that. We're also setting this up, and I got a comment earlier on, like, oh, GIS is hard to show. Well, we're also adopting to new ways, which I'll show you a little bit later on, evolving our software to the way that people want it. Everyday users that can make use of the data that the GIS stewards are maintaining every day. So looking at mobile devices and so forth. So a little bit about the relationship with Esri and the City of Longmont. Actually been a customer of ours for over 20 years. And a few years ago, they had something called the Enterprise License Agreement. This probably has gone through council to get passed. What that means is you have unlimited access to all of our software, so you can keep on deploying it. And we want you to do that. We want you to keep on making use of that. Specifically, why we're here tonight is for a special achievement in GIS. Every year we give what's called the Special Achievement in GIS Award. We nominate folks from each state, and Longmont stuck out for a couple reasons. Earlier in the year, in 2013, there was a hackathon. Longmont's opened up the hackathon to let other people come in and write code to build new wave applications that could be adopted by the city. One of the things that stuck out there for the city, I'll just show on the website, is expose all the data sets from GIS in our platform so people can easily access it and download it. So this wasn't really that groundbreaking from a technology perspective, but I think just the fact that you did it. We still run into a lot of cities and counties that are just data hoards and they don't want to share the data. And we're seeing a lot more transparency in government. So seeing the use of this technology and the way that we're sharing the data and being open about it is very appealing because that's something that we're promoting as well. The other thing that stuck out to why we nominated for the Special Achievement GIS Award was the floods. Our software is changing pretty rapidly, and ways that we can use it to make better decisions, go out and collect data, specifically going out and collecting data in the field. We saw many organizations that were just kind of stuck. They were a little bit hesitant about trying something new, especially in a time of emergency. I guess at the time, maybe Longmont took a little bit of a risk in doing so, but they were able to see immediate returns on how to capture that data, rather than sending field staff out with pen and paper and antiquated workflows and using our technology. So those are a couple of big reasons why we stuck out. And as Sandy was saying, that it is a team effort. I know Lisa Schertz here has done a lot within coordinating all the GIS efforts, but from all the different departments, there's many GIS analysts that we've got to know that have come together, from Public Works to the Utilities Department, that have made use of all the software. Now I'm just going to turn over and go into a little bit of a demonstration mode just to show a couple other things. There's a larger ArcGIS Online platform where you can make use of web applications. You may have seen a couple of these applications before, just such as simple maps. So this is just taking a multimedia approach of what happened during the flood and where was it, just to communicate what has happened within the city. There's also maps on this front page, such as assessments. This is basically the data that was used to collect with the mobile devices. So you can go out and take pictures, and you automatically getting that data synced up live, so you can see what your field editors are doing, get reports about estimated cost of damage and so forth. And lastly, I just want to show is this is a platform you can access in other ways. And earlier I sent out an email that you can access maps from this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to Oops. Hopefully show you my iPad here. Let's see. AirPlay is not showing up. What's that? Uh-oh. Sorry, give me 1 second here. You have it? Oh, cool. Oh, great. So I'm going to borrow Sandy's iPad here. So what this is an application called Explorer. It runs on the iPad. We just released this a couple weeks ago. It's going to be out on Android devices next month, and then Windows devices later on. But we gave all of you as council, and anyone at the city could have access to this. What we set up is a group of maps that you as city council would probably be interested in. So as you're at meetings or you're getting asked questions, maybe I have a question about a subdivision, or I have a user that's, or a constituent that's asking me something about my subdivisions. I can click on the map, see what the subdivisions are, or I can start to do searches for a specific subdivision and see where they are on the map. So this map is really pretty straightforward. We just wanted to give you a handful of maps that you could use. Other ones such as City of Longmont Trail status. We can also do some other real quick things here, such as if I'm getting a citizen complaint here about this, I want to take this sketch and I want to send a link of my sketch up about where someone's complaining and maybe email it to myself or other people within the city. So this is something you guys have access to. We just wanted to kind of carry along the theme of your GIS staff is doing great work, but it also is ready available at your hands. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to show, just give you a taste. There's a lot more we can do. I think sometimes when people get a SAG award, it's just a tipping point. You can start doing a lot more analysis and making better decisions. You have a lot more access to maps. Just keep in mind, these maps do take work to put together, so I know your GIS staff can be busy sometimes too, so there's effort that goes into them. But I'll end it with that, and thank you all for having me, and open up to any questions if you have any.
The only question I have is what city staff was involved in this? I assume it's a few of the people looking terrified.
The very front row. Made them come down and then sit in the front row. Yeah, you know, tonight we have several of our GIS folks. We have Braden Ward, Tamara Taravist, Brett Russo, Yan Jin, and Lisa Schertz. We also have from ETS Kathy Woods and Jim Wall. So we'd like for everyone to kind of come back together with Jeremiah and just get a couple pictures if that's okay. These folks, you know, during the flood, Lisa and I were talking a little bit about Brett's contribution during the flood. We've actually redone our entire EOC in many ways in order to capitalize on the capabilities of GIS, because we were literally lugging a printer across the street at one point, yeah, you're all nodding, to try to get the maps that we needed during the flood disaster. And Jim Wall has really spent a good amount of time trying to outfit the EOC in a different way so that those things are much more digital now, because it became very, very clear to us how valuable the GIS functions were during the flood. I would say, and you know, Harold and I were just talking about it. Yeah, go ahead.
Invaluable during the flood, if you really had to talk about the work that they put together. What a lot of folks don't realize is the map that you all saw early on really allowed us to put together the estimated damage numbers and get that information into the state faster than anyone else. And so it really put us on the front end of a lot of the processes. And as a result, we think we were really fortunate in getting probably one of the, if not the strongest team of PAC teams in terms of working with us. And so it really helped us move through the process. And that was just a product of the information they were putting in the system and the way that we could present that information to our state and federal counterparts.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, excellent. So Tamara is the one who does supervision for GIS work in Public Works. Why don't you go ahead and stand up and bring your team on in?
And we have a weak mayor here, and it's even weaker when he's not here. So I'm going to invite all of council
There you go. That's great.
come on up and get their picture taken with these groups. What? Oh, no, absolutely not. This is my chair tonight. No. What is it, Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So you mentioned that Windows is later What does later mean? Can you define that?
There's always like a convoluted mathematical equation when new software is going to be out. It might be 2015 is probably what I'm hearing, early part of 2015.
Okay.
For you specifically, there's other options that we can work with via email of working via a browser. It might not be the nice experience what I showed here, but there would be other options for you to get going now.
Any other comments? Now we can take a picture.
Okay, great. And obviously Jim Walls, our Chief Information Officer, Kathy Woods is our Technology Manager, and Lisa, where did Lisa hide to? And Lisa is our overall coordinator who does a great job in the city. So come on up, everybody, and thank you for your work.
Well, I guess Polly's here.
In this way, right in this way. Yeah, right in this way. That's great.
Hey, Jim, you want to step in? There you go.
On.
My turn.
Your turn. With the close-ups. Everybody smile.
Everybody look here.
Wonderful.
One more over here.
Thank you all for your work.
And Secretary Skip, just to be clear, you said we're removing 8C, correct? What did you say about 8C?
I said 9C we were removing from the.
9C. Well, lucky I clarified because I crossed out 8C. There's a long list of people who have things to say, so that's why I was checking. Didn't want to screw up or get lynched. All right, let's go ahead and start with, we have a list now. Let's go ahead and do our public invited to be heard. Mr. Strider Benson.
Well, let's have no lynching. Strider Benson, 951 West 17th Avenue. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Bagley and Council. So much has been going on lately, like Lily Tomlin, I can't keep up. But there's some of them pieces fall together. North Carolina, just on top of all kinds of restriction on voting against students, against rural people, against old people, against black people, against sick people, against women, all this stuff. Now they're abolishing precincts in cities so that people who happen to be not replete with transportation can't get to the polling place. Also, they're cutting the days and hours and the groups who can vote. So, and hey, Texas, the Attorney General of Texas, who is running for governor, just passed a new law by himself. It's already, there are no zoning laws in the state of Texas, and they have a law making it illegal for towns to pass zoning laws. So you have West Texas, which blew up last year, having an explosives plant right next to an elementary school and a high school, and they blew up the whole town. Well, the Attorney General, who is running for governor, just passed a new law saying it is illegal for the public to know about explosive plants being in their neighborhood. Passed a law, said you can't find out. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. 2 weeks ago, the Supreme Court really showed their colors. You got Hobby Lobby, which they said was a narrow decision, and then a few days later, they have Wheaton College, which the very same thing in broad decision. Justice Sotomayor said, we've got a new thing with the Supreme Court. When we tell you something, you can't believe it anymore, because 3 days later, we're going to tell you exactly the opposite after the uproar dies down. The one thing it will do is guarantee a whole lot of lawyers get richer, because there are going to be thousands of cases now trying to figure out what they meant. And, of course, the law against women at every level. The interesting thing is, for the first time in 225 years in this country, the Supreme Court has opened the door to Sharia law. The Treaty of Utrecht in 1648, Europe woke up and said, you can't mix religion and politics. We kill millions of people when you do that. Now the Supreme Court has opened the door and said, under the corporate dictatorship, you don't have to obey the law.
I hate to break you off, Mr.
Thank you.
Benson. Thank you.
All right.
We feel that's it for public invited to be heard. Let's go on to ordinances on second reading and their public hearings.
Your first item is Ordinance 8A, Ordinance 2014-35, which is a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for the expenses and liabilities of the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2014. There is not a formal staff presentation on this item, but we do have staff present to answer questions.
Do we have any comments or questions of staff before we begin the public hearing? Then let's go ahead and move on to the public hearing, but we don't have any names. So now do we have any comments or questions of staff? All right, let's go ahead and vote. The what? Let's go ahead and open it for public hearing. Anyone? Seeing none, why don't we go ahead and vote?
We have to move it.
Oh, okay. Well, do we have a motion?
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, I would like to move ordinance 2014-35.
I'll second it. Now we can vote. Thank you, Councilmember Finley. Just anxious. It passes with the mayor absent.
Your next item is Ordinance 2014-36, a bill for an ordinance authorizing financing of certain expenses relating to the redevelopment of the Twin Peaks Mall, and in connection therewith authorizing the sale and subsequent leasing of certain city property and the execution and delivery by the city of a deed, a lease purchase agreement, and other documents related to the financing, authorizing officials of the city to take all action necessary to carry out the transaction contemplated hereby, and ratifying actions previously taken, and providing other matters related thereto. And there is no formal staff presentation at this point.
Is Joan Peck here? At this time, what we'd like to do, let's go ahead and just go right into the public hearings on this matter. And Ms. Peck, if you want to come down, you're the one and only on the list.
Hello, my name's Joan Peck, 1935 Spruce Avenue. I got buzzed. First of all, I would like to say that our mall, being built by Alan Ginsberg and his company, he can't afford to build them all. It was a bad investment for him, and he is turning to the city to bail him out. The way this 2014-36 is worded is a little bit deceiving, because it is my understanding that what you want to do is either sell the library, the civic center, and the safety building next to the library to help Mr. Ginsberg build his mall, with that being paid back within a 23 to 25 year span. And if I don't understand the wording completely, but it sounds like you're going to sell it, give the deed, and then subsequently lease it back from him. This may be done in other cities, but the reality is this mall hasn't been developed very well from the onset. It's run up against all kinds of problems, and now we want to sell our city property to bail him out or to help subsidize it, however you want to say it. But malls all over the country are failing. Have you been to Flatirons lately or to 29th Street? This is a bad investment for the city. It used to be that when people bought property, they would get investors to help develop it. Obviously, he didn't get enough investors, or there's not enough interest to make this work. If this is a bad investment for Mr. Ginsburg, then perhaps he should walk away from it. When I was on the library board, I definitely wanted a branch library in this city, and was told constantly, we don't have any money for it. Even when I came before council and researched and said that you can build this library using lottery funds if you connect it to a city building, like a rec center or whatever, nothing. It never got off the ground. Now you want to sell the library to a trust fund and help somebody in an investment that you don't know if it will work. If you look countrywide, nationwide, malls are pretty much defunct. So I would like you to vote no on this. Do not subsidize this mall. I know it's being done in other cities, but look at the results of those cities. What are those malls doing now? Have you investigated that? Please vote no to sell these properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peck. Now we'd like to open it up to other members of the public, should they have any.
My name is Dwayne Lease. I live at 2686 Pearl Howlett Road. Mayor Pro Tem Brian Bagley and members of council. The internet has impacted retail businesses extraordinarily. I know myself, I purchase probably 95% of the stuff that I buy, not in town, but on the internet, and especially all of my electronics, wide swaths of stuff. This is what the malls are facing. It is a new paradigm as to how goods are distributed. You are, from what I understand, you're literally putting at risk the center structure of our government. Our government operates out of this building. You're risking that for essentially an economic endeavor, a private economic endeavor. It's inappropriate. This is not what government is about. How many of you consider yourselves to be conservatives? And if you are a conservative, do the conservative thing. Don't risk so much for so little. I have another question for you. What kind of collateral do you have if he just goes belly up? I don't see anything about collateral. I don't understand the little bit of verbiage that I've seen on this. This is an open door. This is like, here's, take, just have. And I don't understand what motivates you to even consider this. To even consider it. We're giving away the commons to private interests who don't care about the community and the society. This is wrong. And it's not something you can say, oh, it's happening over there and it's happening over there. No, you, each one of you, when you cast a vote to say, yes, let's go ahead and do this, you're responsible. You are the responsible parties. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a little bit of a unique situation in that it's an important vote. Mayor Coombs and myself at the time had asked that we postpone the vote because we wanted to participate. The mayor's still not here. So what I'd like to do, or what we'd like to do, is wait for the mayor to get back to engage in discussion, debate, etc., unless you guys want to have some discussion now. Thoughts? Councilmember Christensen?
I think it would be good to wait for the mayor so we have a full slate of the whole council to discuss it.
Okay. Then before I request a motion, the reason I called for the public invited to be heard is, Ms. Peck, I know your name was on there, and we're going to be reconvening hopefully this Friday at 9 o'clock in the morning in order to discuss the issues that you folks brought up. Can I have a motion, please? Councilmember Finley.
I will respond. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Bagley. I'd like to move that we postpone this item until Friday, July, this Friday at 9 a.m.
Second. All right. Any other further discussion before we vote? All right, let's vote. It passes with, surprisingly, the mayor absent. Let's go on to item C.
Item 9C is a bill for an ordinance approving the land use amendment to the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan for the southeast sub-area generally located east of 119th Street, west of the eastern border of Sandstone Ranch Park, north of the southern border of the Longmont Planning Area, and south of 3rd Avenue and the railroad tracks. And Aaron Fostick, Senior Planner, is present to make the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, members of the City Council, Aaron Fostick with the Planning and Development Services Department. Tonight we're here for second reading and public hearing on the southeast sub-area Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan amendments. I'm joined by Planner Ben Ortiz, so we're both available to answer any questions that you might have. You'll recall that this item was pulled on June 24th at first reading, so we did do a presentation. Since it is a public hearing item today, we'd like to just kind of go through some items again. It'll be a little bit abbreviated, but if there's anything you need us to elaborate on, please let us know. So we talked a little bit about the process and council direction at the last meeting. Just to orient you, this is the study area that we looked at. So we've got the Longmont Planning Area on the south, Sandstone Ranch and Fairview on the east, 3rd Avenue and the railroad tracks on the north, and 119th Street on the west. This is approximately 1,100 acres, and you'll recall that there's about 420 properties within the study area, which represents about 370 individual property owners. This map depicts the proposed changes that went to Planning and Zoning Commission and that we went through at the meeting a couple weeks ago. You'll recall that the changes basically fall into two categories, housekeeping amendments and then proposed changes. Again, housekeeping amendments are those that staff has identified. These are basically changes that correct the land use to meet what's on the ground today. So for example, there's condos in Mill Village that are currently shown as low density residential on the comp plan. Their density is actually a medium density, so we're proposing to change that to match what's on the ground today. The proposed changes, and these are labeled proposed change, are those that through our public process, through our dialogue with property owners, have been requested to be changed. And you'll see those labeled as proposed changes and described in the council communication. I did go through each of these with you at the meeting on the 24th, so I wasn't planning on doing that tonight, but if you'd like me to, I certainly can do that. At the meeting on the 24th, it was also requested that we provide a summary of what the net gain or loss for each land use category was, and so we provided some supplemental information in your packet that broke that down both by individual change. There's 11 changes, so you'll see that as table 1, and then also a summary. So you can see here that with the proposed changes, and this again is in total over the whole 1,100 acre study area, we're losing about 77 acres of industrial economic development. A good portion of that is the change that's taking out some open space. There are some additional changes, though, that are resulting in some of that loss. A small, slight change in low-density residential. Those are primarily for housekeeping amendments. Medium-density residential, again, those are proposed changes that are causing that. High-density residential is a gain of about 16 acres, and that's described in your communication. That's really a single change that's causing that. And then parks, greenways, and open space. Again, I mentioned that rather large acreage on the west side of the study area, and actually just outside the study area. That's a housekeeping amendment. The city purchased open space that's right now shown as industrial economic development. That's a housekeeping change. So with that, I will be happy to take questions and look forward to your discussion.
Any questions or comments from council?
Yes.
Councilmember Christensen?
I'm wondering why we are bundling both the housekeeping changes, which I understand. Those are, I understand, and I'm for that. But these other proposed land changes, we would be voting for not even knowing who owns the land. It's not a matter of public record. And one of these, we specifically voted to change, to deny changing the proposed change of zoning before, and now it's sort of being put in here and voted on this way. I think we seriously need to take out all of these 6 properties that are proposed change and vote on them individually. I would vote to have to accept the housekeeping changes, but I would never vote to have these just bundled and accepted blankly like that.
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, Councilmember Christensen, we were directed to just look at the area. It was kind of a staff decision, just kind of for simplicity's sake, to break those up. In the Planning and Zoning Commission packet, you will see some correspondence from property owners or representatives of those requested changes. And just to reiterate, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, but staff did not propose any changes that property owners didn't request. So there may be additional areas that it makes sense to have a land use change or to evaluate that, which could be part of a larger comprehensive plan update that we hopefully kick off next year. But staff didn't propose any changes that were not supported by the owners of the property. So those changes that you do see that are proposed changes are requests from either current property owners or people who have options on property with permission. But certainly I think you could make a motion to consider each change separately or consider them, however makes most sense to council.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, there's a couple things that kind of concern me about this, and that's one of them is the loss of economic development property, and the other one being that the whole study doesn't seem to be very strategic in what does Longmont need versus what do the property owners want, and kind of puts it into a light that, well, what's being proposed to me is not, in my mind, either good or bad, but how does this fit strategically into Longmont's long-term vision, especially along the entrance corridor as Highway 66. And it just doesn't feel like it's what I was expecting to see when it came back from our initial request earlier this year. I was expecting to see a strategic approach to how this could be done. And like I said, I'm not passing judgment on each good or bad, but what I'm saying is that it doesn't seem like going out and asking people what they want to build is really a strategic way of delivering a comprehensive plan to a city council. And I'm not really happy with it, so that's all I have to say.
Councilmember Levison.
I guess, Ms. Fosdick, I'm just not sure how this part fits into the greater puzzle of doing the comprehensive plan update next year. Because if we already have changed these uses, we don't have that larger strategic mapping by the whole community, as Councilmember Moore just referenced. So it would almost seem silly for the entire community then to take a look at this sub area and then maybe come up with something different. And I also feel that when we've got 370 individual property owners, and when you look at the list for the public meeting, there really are not that many people who showed up to make comments. And I've had a little bit of email correspondence with one of the residents of Mill Village, and my impression is that, there was not a lot of enthusiasm from the residential neighborhood that's been there for, over a decade, to be that up to date on the process. Maybe not up to date is the best term to use, as shoulder to shoulder when the council has disregarded a lot of their concerns on the changing environment out here. And I just think that we may not have making a broad subplan area change like this is not something that really fits in with the overall goals when we do the comp plan, I think. So I think that I know we asked you guys to do it, and we have the information. It just doesn't mean that we may want to go forward with all of the proposed changes, because as Councilmember Christensen just pointed out, we said no to increasing a density on a parcel, yet, basically we're going to reverse that if we vote in some of these proposed changes without having an additional proposal for people to come and comment on. So,
did you just quick couple questions? First of all, other than asking what the property owners wanted their property to become zoned as, did we do any other type of data collection, research, analysis citywide at all, or even specific to the area?
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, I guess I want to clarify. I don't want to give the impression to council that, a property owner requested something and we rubber stamped it and on it went to our map. That certainly wasn't the process that we used. We met with property owners on several occasions. There were certain changes, frankly, that people said they'd like to see that we said really probably doesn't fit in well with the overall land supply of the city, nor may it not meet some of the locational criteria. I mean, the piece that I think Councilmember Levison is referring to that was requesting high density, certainly we advised people we're not going to really want to entertain a change, a request for high density again, since council just didn't approve that. So yes, I mean, we've, what we heard from, I think, council in getting this direction and also in previous applications was that you were not interested in seeing piecemeal amendments that had been coming to you. I think there was 3 over the past 2 years. And for those amendments, and any amendment really, we definitely do take a look at land supply and vacancy. And, what we found is that we don't have a lot of we prepared analysis and shared that with you during the copper mill discussion. We've also found that there's a quite significant amount of industrial economic development land in the planning area, a rather large supply. You know, I think we've obviously also consulted with not only property owners, but we've tried to engage with residents in the area through homeowners associations and also with organizations like LAEC to kind of get a sense of what would make sense. So, you know, I think I mentioned last time that certainly we didn't have the time, frankly, to go through and do the kind of analysis and land supply analysis that we will hopefully get to do next year when we do a citywide comp plan update. But I think, you know, we have a pretty good handle on what our land supply data looks like, and certainly we did look at that. You know, one example is we often cite that we have quite a bit of retail and land uses. You know, it's kind of hard to read on the map, but there's a few that are commercial. We don't really encourage people to apply for those amendments because we have an overabundance of that. You know, I think with the copper mill piece, we talked about low density versus medium density, and I think when we take a look at some of the compatibility issues that we might see with low density abutting industrial districts, that was something that we said, you know, maybe considering there's already medium density to the east, industrial surrounding it. If residential is really what this property owner wants to go after, maybe medium density is, you know, a good compromise both for the neighborhood and something that would benefit the city in terms of getting us additional housing, which I think, you know, things like our housing needs study support. So we did look at additional data. Again, I don't think we did the full level of analysis that we'll do when we do the full comp plan update, but you know, we didn't, again, simply rubber stamp requests that came in.
Councilmember Christensen.
I think you did a lot of work. I don't think you rubber stamped anything, but my concern is in doing things and having these proposals for proposed changes of zoning bundled with housekeeping changes, you just don't get to hear from, instead of having them considered individually, you don't really get to hear from the public. And I just think that our job is to hear from the public always and to make it all as above board as possible and transparent. And this gives the public a chance to actually report on the complexities of each particular parcel. Thank you.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm just confused. This passed on first reading 5-2. So basically what I've heard today is basically just a reversal of that direction from members of council. We asked you to go do work, and basically now we're just, I'm confused. So I'm trying to wrap my head around some of the questions and statements that have been made. It's mentioned that lack of resident participation due to council actions. I do recall that one passed and one didn't pass. So that's batting 500 right there. I'd take that any day of the week. But what I'm trying to understand is that we've asked staff to do some work for us. We have the product. I understand some concern regarding the economic development piece, but as it was mentioned, and here's where I may differ, and I read the email that we received from the LAEC, and I kind of differ with that email. And it always makes for interesting conversation. I don't have a problem with changing that zoning, unless we're going to go out and purchase each and every individual parcel of these, each and every one of these parcels, and zone it whatever we want. That's what I would recommend council do then, if we're going to have that discussion. You know, we asked for not to do these piecemeal, to bring these back in one amendment, and here it is right before us. And I understand there's some opposition and there's some support for it. People were notified, went through planning and zoning, passed first reading, 5-2. Understand some of their concerns then. We're here. Vote for it, yes. Vote for it, no. Shoot it down, what have you. I'm just confused. I'm trying to understand the Jekyll and Hyde of those statements. I'm so lost. What was a good work product for what I have seen staff do regarding the comprehensive plan on one section of the city. Aaron, I'm sorry, I don't think I don't know what to tell you. Good work, and Ben, thank you for doing it. I just don't know where this is going to go.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Bagley. Hi, Aaron. Can you tell us, for the people who may not have completely read their packet or the public who hasn't seen it, how many public meetings there actually were on this subject?
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, Councilmember Finley, we had, technically there's been 3. This is one of them, a public hearing. There's a Planning Commission public hearing. And then also there was an informational meeting. That's the meeting that Councilmember Levison referenced, that we had about 45 people attend, which is, we were pretty pleased with the turnout. I mean, it's
that's a lot for a public hearing on land.
It is, but you know what we told folks at that meeting was that we may or may not have another kind of open house type meeting, depending on the nature of the changes. So we didn't, frankly, get much feedback from folks at that meeting. We did have some good conversations and heard and did get some feedback, which factored into what we're proposing tonight. But you know what our thought was if there was a whole bunch of changes that either people living there, other organizations, property owners were proposing that were going to kind of drastically change the area, that we'd want to come back and you know, I think we were thinking maybe we'd have alternatives, but really what we found through the process was that there weren't a lot of property owners that were ready. I think I mentioned this last time. They weren't really ready to commit to changing things. They didn't have a plan necessarily. You know, one of the changes that was originally included, the property owner said, actually, I'm not ready to do this. So that one kind of came off. And so we felt that, you know, really, if you look at it, there's kind of, I'll say 2 changes that are real change. I don't want to say real changes, but proposed changes. I mean, there's a couple changes if you look at, and maybe we should have done a better job of clarifying this. They are labeled as proposed changes, but they're really to make the land use consistent with the zoning. So in those cases, we could probably consider those housekeeping as well. Those we did present at the public meeting of likely changes. So we had 3 public meetings. That's a really long answer to an easy question. Sorry.
Well, no, I appreciate the clarification. Those proposed changes that are really housekeeping changes, that would be number 4?
So it would be number 2, which is the concept property. So it's right south of the letters eastern buffer on the map. That currently is designated as medium density residential, but it's zoned to BLI. And I think you'll probably hear from the LAEC that this is a property that they are definitely interested in seeing remain IED. So the zoning right now is business light industrial, which would be consistent with an IED land use. So that would be a change we've kind of had on our radar. Change number 5, which adds a neighborhood/district park symbol. This is really the result of the master plan. So it is a proposed change, but in some ways it's kind of housekeeping because it was proposed by that master plan. You could probably categorize it either way. And then change number 11, that's a little acre-sized square right next, north of 119, next to the proposed high-density residential. Right there. And that is also currently zoned BLI, but for whatever reason, we're not sure why, it's designated as parks, greenways, and open space on the comp plan map. So again, the zoning is inconsistent with the land use. So the two that I'm referring to that are requests are change number 1. That's the high density residential, number 1 right here.
So number 1 is one of those changes that's
Maybe
not housekeeping.
It's not housekeeping.
And what's
then
the other one?
The one that the council previously considered, that was formerly known as Copper Mill.
7?
Yes, that is correct. So that may be a way that you want to look at these as well, following up on what Councilmember Christensen mentioned.
Okay, so the proposed change, let's just talk about number 1 for a minute. Is that the one that LAEC sent us the letter on?
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, Councilmember Finley, I have not seen a letter, but I know I have had conversations with LAEC that this is a concern. The loss of industrial economic development in this area could be of concern to them. I think Wendy's here, and I assume maybe would speak at the public hearing.
Okay, I think that's all my questions till we've had the public hearing. Thank you, Aaron.
Councilmember Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Aaron, I just one quick clarification. Any of these proposed changes are also going to require rezoning. Is that what I'm reading into this, as well as just the comp plan? Is that correct?
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, Councilmember Moore, that is correct. We did not include rezonings. So the two changes that we just talked about, number 1 and number 7, would require a rezoning before anything could happen. What staff would recommend is if these land use changes are approved tonight, that you would direct staff to bring back a rezoning so that we don't end up in the same scenario that we're in now with some of these where we have a land use that's inconsistent with a rezone. But you are correct, it would require a rezoning, which would require a separate process, public hearing, going to Planning Commission, and coming back here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Levison?
Thank you. I have a couple of process questions. I know that, as a statement of fact, we've had 3 meetings where people could give public input, right? One of them was a meeting where it was kind of the first meeting, kind of a free-for-all. Nobody really knew what people were thinking, and people were hashing it out, and that lasted about an hour, and nobody could really get a lot of prep to know what people were thinking. There were no proposed maps being discussed, so, in my opinion, that's a really great first start. And then the other 2 public meetings are this high-stakes hearing on second reading tonight, and the high-stakes series, the meeting at Planning and Zoning, where if you had a discussion point for even 4 of these items, how would you make a cogent case to Planning and Zoning in 3 minutes or less? If you had 4 of these properties as a neighborhood resident or a property owner that you'd want to discuss or put points out. So while we, have met a public meeting requirement, the actual rigorous engagement and discussion might still be lacking, just as the process. And that's not really anyone's fault per se, but I think that people get discouraged and disengaged when they don't have an opportunity to have a base of education first, and then understand the dynamic of the planning process. And I can imagine not that many people on that public meeting list had been around to go to a comp plan update meeting back in 0203. So that there might not have been enough information on how this process has worked. So I also see that this evening we also have an option of saying thank you for all the work, because I think that we do have better information now, and then we keep this as the first level of work in this area of town for the comp plan update. I still have lingering concerns where I haven't seen the details of traffic studies, for example. If all these proposed changes happen, where's the tipping point on the traffic? And, eventually there is a capacity issue at that intersection of 3rd and 119, coming out of the neighborhood, coming in from, the area north and west. So those are the kind of dynamics I'm still looking for. And I know we don't have anything finite because you can't do that until you know what you're going to build. And any of these land uses could still change too upon request of a property owner.
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, Councilmember Levison, thank you. I completely forgot that, I didn't forget that Tyler was here, but I forgot to mention that he has done the analysis that we talked about on first reading. So I'll step away and let him present some of the information that he has.
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, Councilmember Levison. So what I did was I looked at trip generation based on assumptions used in the comp plan, and I got those from Aaron, as far as averages of how many units per acre and low, medium, high density residential, what the mix of the IED land is, office, retail, that kind of land uses, and just using that kind of analysis on trip generation on what's existing to what's proposed. All of these changes, the housekeeping plus everything else we've talked about tonight, overall trips potentially generated by this would go down, I don't know, approximately 40%, but that's obviously hard to say for sure without knowing what exactly the land uses are at this point. But on a comp plan level, trips would go down based on these changes we're looking at tonight. And the 3rd and 119 intersection, capacity issues aren't driven by this particular developments on this area of Longmont in the southeast area we're looking at. The capacity constraints at that intersection are going to be driven more by the regional traffic on 119 east-west through. And we just recently completed a long-range transportation plan that also identified we would eventually need a 3rd lane each direction on 119 there.
Before we open up to the public invited to be heard, just to add a little context, my memory could be wrong, but I was the one who originally moved that we do this. And my thinking was that right now in that area of Longmont, we've got people who don't know what is going on, including council. And so we've got, when some of us first came on council, we had the residents of Mill Village who were looking at having high density apartment buildings put into the neighborhood. And a lot of them were upset, and they wanted to know, why in the world did you let us build our houses and move into this neighborhood if we're going to have these apartment buildings moving in? And I guess I just don't think it's fair for landowners who want to develop or current property owners who are waiting for that announced development to kind of be hanging in limbo as to what the city's going to do down there. And so I understand that it's not a citywide look, but my thinking when I first made the motion was not to etch anything in stone, but to start moving in a direction that we can start telling people this is the vision for the area. We've got an entire city that we can tweak in the formal process, but we're not hearing a lot of other areas in the city. We're hearing people come forward from this area saying, we want to build, and we're saying yes to some, no to others, and it seems to be, and I have no idea what the comments are going to be, which is why I'm making the comments now, but we tend to be following whoever's loudest at the moment, whether it be Wendell Pickett, or whether it be Mill Village, or Copper Village, and I just think that's bad business, or bad government. And so, regardless of what council does, I mean, I would implore that we probably should give some guidance and insight rather than just saying, you know what, time out. You know, we're essentially putting in their minds, you know, if I was a property owner, I'd be like, okay, well, I guess there's a moratorium on development down there because we're not telling anybody anything other than, well, thanks for the information, and continue to do whatever it is you've been doing, which is wander in the wilderness, not knowing what to do with the land. So that's what I'm thinking. Those are my thoughts at the moment, but I'm anxious to hear what the public has to say. So let's go ahead and open it to the public at this time, and starting with Wendy Nafziger. And the infamous letter.
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, members of council. The Longmont Area Economic Council would like to state for the record that we do not support the rezoning of the 21-acre parcel on the Concepts Direct site, which is north of Sandstone Ranch, west of Colorful Avenue, and the site that you have been all talking about, the brown in the middle of the gray, from industrial economic development to high-density residential. This is the only 100-plus acre parcel on the east side of Longmont currently zoned for economic development, and ease of access to the I-25 corridor is very important to companies looking at the area for this kind of a parcel. It's also one of only 3 100-plus acre sites in the entire city currently zoned for economic development. Our organization strives to preserve land available for economic development and job creation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Joan Peck.
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley and Council, and Joan Peck at Elm Spruce Avenue. I do think that we do have a vision down there, and it's called our Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan. There are zoning rules already. When someone comes to a city to build, do they not look at the zoning and know that that is the plan for which their building development is supposed to be in the zoning that the Longmont Comprehensive Plan and staff and City Council has already established? The fact that 1,100 acres wants to approach, regardless of how many owners there are, the city and say, we would like to change your comprehensive plan to meet what we want it to be right now, does not make sense. What's the point of having a plan? If you would, my opinion is if you want to change these zoning regulations and rules, move up the overall comprehensive plan and vision for the city from next year to now. It sounds like these developers need to develop, want to develop, but they don't want to develop within the zoning that we've already established. So, and I do agree with some of you in that, why are we bundling all of these? They need to come to us individually and say your zoning does not match what we wanted to develop. But to put them in a bundle and then suddenly they want to change that within that bundle, that makes absolutely no sense. What's the point of us ever putting in any zoning or any rules and regulations? If you want a vision for this city, the comprehensive plan is where you get it. There would be no problem in moving up, redoing that whole comprehensive plan for the city before next year. What would be the problem with doing that? If you don't want to do that, then I think that developers have to go with what we've got on record now for our zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Barb Brunk.
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, Councilman, I'm Barb Brunk. I'm a landscape architect with Resource Conservation Partners, P.O. Box 1522, Longmont, Colorado. I'm here on behalf of Urban West to talk about the Concepts property. And we respectfully disagree with the LAEC that high-density residential is inappropriate on this property. This property has been vacant, IED ground, for quite some time, and half of it was designated medium-density residential. So when the people that I'm representing first looked at the property, their intent was developed consistent with the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan land use designation, which is different than the underlying zoning because they relied on the LACP when they looked at the property. As we went through this process, we met with staff, we went to that open house, we met with Wendy, and several things stuck out with us. First, there is a dearth of high-density residential property available in Longmont, a serious dearth. And when you listen to Kathy talk about the problem for housing in Longmont, it's significant. These potential landowners are willing and able to go forward and develop a high-density residential project that doesn't have neighbors, that are going to be concerned about adding high-density residential to their neighborhood. They also listened to Wendy when she said this was a really good IED property. And so they said, well, okay, then let's ask staff to put the medium-density residential back to gray so that when someone is looking for the vision of the LACP, they will see that this is industrial economic development, and they are willing and able to work with LAEC to find users for the property. The disagreement comes with, is it appropriate to have residential and IED together? And I think, in my experience, mixed use is a better project. This is a gateway to our community, and any economic development that can't live in a neighborhood with a high-density residential project does not belong at the gateway to our community. I think it can be done well, and it can be done in an integrated manner so that people who may work in those jobs have a place to live nearby. It's a great place. It's got pedestrian access. It's got 119 access. It has the Spring Gulch amenity. So there's really good amenities for high density. Walmart is right there. People can walk and bike to a grocery store. So lots of good things about multifamily there. There's also lots of good things about industrial economic development. So our request was to try to balance those issues and request something going forward. That said, if you are going to take those one at a time, we would like to have an opportunity to talk to you about it one at a time. So please don't deny it out of hand so that we can't come back and talk to you about it another time. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel Kane.
Hi. Good evening, City Council and Mayor Pro Tem Brian Bagley. I'm Shelley Kane. I live at 1601 Great Western Drive. I've lived at Riverbend Townhomes for 14 years now. I'm very concerned about the land west to us. I think that's Area 7 maybe, where the Copper Mill apartments were looking at going in. Very concerned since I bought there. We have a really nice development with single-family homes and townhomes. We now have a Walmart to the east, huge, just outrageous apartments to the north. Several of the homes are now for sale because of those apartment buildings. And I'm just really concerned what's going to go into the west of us. I'd like to see it a low-density neighborhood, not more townhomes. Our area is much too small to be surrounded by apartment buildings, and very concerned on that. I was on the HOA board for 5 years up to probably 6 months ago. We've never had a request from the city to meet with our association. We have 142 owners in there, so would have liked to have an opportunity to have input. My understanding is I've been to one meeting, and it was all in the beginning, so we haven't had a lot of input. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, and I appreciate those of you concerned with this. Thanks.
Thank you. Jeff Roberg.
Mayor Pro Tem, Council, good evening. Let me just start by thanking you for trying to bring some clarity to the area, and just have a few comments. So first, the area that was just referenced, area number 7. You know, that area it's currently listed as medium density, but it would be better suited as low density. And my understanding is the landowner has requested low density for it, so as we move forward on that, I'd suggest to look at low density for that area. Also wanted to talk about the locational criteria for these changes. I think just because these are all bundled together in an area update, it doesn't mean that we're not concerned with the locational criteria that normally are applied. And so I would suggest, you know, to look at the individual changes and really make sure that the locational criteria, that those have been satisfied. And I think that it would be reasonable to take at certain changes and look at them individually. And so that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Montgomery.
Mayor Bagley and committee, council members. I do agree the bundle package needs to be separated.
Could we get your name and address, please?
Pardon?
If you don't oppose, could we please get your name and address?
Oh, Laura Montgomery, 1601 Great Western Drive.
Thank you.
Okay. I do agree that the whole thing needs to be separated so that the council can vote on them individually. There is a wide range of land in Longmont for high-density apartments. We already have the new ones that have gone in. In a short, about 10-block radius, you have over 400 homes already, and now you've got over 400 apartments that are being built. The amount of people that are selling right now in between the houses and the townhomes is the worst I've seen it in the 6 years I've been in the community. The congestion, which was brought up, is going to be a huge issue because you only have the traffic light at County Road 1 and 119, and then you have 3rd Avenue and 119. Those are your two outlets to get out because there's no light at Great Western Drive. And it's just going to be a huge issue if we put more apartments in there. We have the mini storage that's going to be going in that is from the old sugar mill dump there. The land we have right now is commercial. I feel it needs to stay commercial instead of going medium density. I know you voted down high density already. I'm grateful for that. But we need more commercial in there than we need homes right now, especially with the apartments that have just gone in. Let's see. We got that one covered. I think we got it all covered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dwayne Lease, you're up again. Did Mr. Lease take off? Oh, okay. Any other members of the public who would like to come on up, ma'am?
Thank you. This is last minute, so thank you very much. My name is Lee Hofstadter. I live at 224 Cattail Court in Mill Village. You say thank you to Mayor Pro Tem Brian Bagley and council. Thank you for listening. I work personally in an industry where we guide organizations, Fortune 500 and others, in strategic planning. When I moved to Longmont 15 years ago, I was very pleased that there was a global strategic plan. I looked at it. I decided where I wanted to live based on that. And I have been involved here and there a lot. So what I would like to just mention to the council, I appreciate people on the council and yourself, as well as Mr. Moore, in thinking that our organization in our town needs to take a global look at what's being done, whether that means you change the time frame of when you do a strategic plan, but to piecemeal make changes is very upsetting to the owners and your constituents, essentially. When we moved into that area, it was mixed use. Now, I understand there's economic conditions. There's a million reasons why organizations change their strategic plan, and I support that. But I never saw any of that. For example, when the apartments came in to our area, there was not one single density criteria that was met. And yet you made a density change and allowed the apartments. They will probably be very attractive. I saw pictures, I went over things, we'll deal with it. But it seems like the same thing is happening again, that it's not a global, coherent look at what is right for that area versus what somebody just wants to build. So I would just ask the council, and as you move forward, to please try to take that look. The only other point I wanted to make is we do not, as residents, we talk in the neighborhood. It is not that huge of a neighborhood. It's very tight. The streets are tight, and we have a fair amount of density with our existing, like other folks have mentioned. We do not feel that as our 400 residents that we really have been weighed in or listened nearly as heavily as the landowners that have larger parcels and want to build. So thank you tonight for hearing our concerns, and we appreciate you listening.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Brendan Hunt, 228 Cattail Court. Sure. Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, members of council. I'm here mainly about the Copper Mill parcel, area 7 on the map. This was originally brought up a few months ago and was voted down as, I believe, a high end of medium density residential by the council at that point. It's being proposed again for the same thing. And it still, the area down there does not meet the requirements for medium density residential. I mean, there's access to other amenities, transportation access for public transportation, access to schools, access to parks. I mean, you're having people have to cross major highways. If we get into 3 lanes worth of 119, as they're talking about expanding that, that becomes a bad game of Frogger trying to get across the highway. Traffic studies. The traffic studies may show that there are enough roads in there for trips over time. Trying to get out of the neighborhood in the morning is an issue. There's only the 2 lights, the one at 119 and County Line Road and the one at 3rd and 119. So I do agree that this should probably be split up and voted on independently. I would urge you to vote against zoning Area 7 as a medium density residential or higher. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Further comments, questions, and debate from council? Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. You know, just for clarification, we asked for not having piecemeal things come to us. Just for clarification, so we wouldn't have these copper mill issues come up again, so we could have not a one shot, we need to fix this all at once, but a amendment to the comprehensive plan, which is a plan which will change as plans do, and if plans don't, then, you know, if you don't change your plan or change your strategic plan, or then business, whether you're in business or government, then your business will or government sometimes fades away. But we asked for this. Whether it's council's prerogative to do these one at a time, you know, we asked for this all to be in one amendment. So with that, I move ordinance 2014-37.
Other comments? I guess the only thing I've had a thought listening to folks, and it's not going to sound pretty, but I don't think any of us in this room know what the hell we're talking about when it comes to land use. I mean, everybody. Everybody. Yeah, Aaron does. That's true. But I'm sitting here, I'm like, whoa, my head's swirling, and I'm struggling thinking, well, okay, so what's the best thing to do for this area? And I, in a strange kind of way, at the same time, I also think everybody's right. So, for example, if we go ahead and move on this, Ms. Brunk, just out of curiosity, so you can just do this, you know, if we said no on this, you could still come back and ask us to change the zoning, and then you could still build your high density residential units, right?
I believe that if you deny our land use amendment, there's a time by which we can't come back and ask for the same thing again. I don't think we can ask the same request that's been denied again for a period of time. So you will delay the opportunity for us to do that. So
okay.
These guys have the property under option. I don't know what they will do if that happens, but
okay.
You know, the other thing I just didn't say before is there's a net loss of IED, but 100 acres of that is taking things that the city purchased as open space and taking it from IED into, so really the net of developable ground isn't really changing that much.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess the other question I have is for the residents, and I part of the reason why I asked for clarity on this area was because that I remember that Copper Village proposal, and I wouldn't want to live next to that. I mean, that's why I got voted down. But then again, you know, the you know, not having some type of medium density or low density, et cetera, and keeping it industrial. I mean, you haven't been here, but we've heard from actually the council member who had my seat prior to me, Brian Hansen, lives in an area, and he's quite upset that he's right up next to light industrial. You know, he can't sleep because it's noisy all the time, and there's no. I'd rather live next to Copper Village rather than that you know, Mr. Pickett's property, who ironically is right in front of you ladies. So I guess I'm kind of torn here. But if we so last question, I guess this one's for Eugene, Mr. May, and city staff. If we go ahead and vote for this change, what does that mean for the area? Meaning that it becomes the localized Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan, and people can move forward, but we still as a council have the power and ability to hear individual plans, proposals, zoning changes, et cetera, correct?
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, if council approves some or all of these land use amendments, they'll be, you know, our entire comp plan map would be changed to reflect that. That does not, again, unless you institute a moratorium, that does not prohibit someone from coming back with a different application, either on one of these properties or on one that's not up here. It should be noted, though, that a couple of them, the ones that we've talked about, would require rezoning before they could do any type of development. So there'd be additional process. So from a comp plan perspective, the map would be updated, you know, in terms of looking at goals, policies, and strategies based on land use. That would be the new land use we'd be looking at.
So the only property that I'm hearing, if we pass this, that there's concern, is again that parcel number 7.
I think there's 2.
There's 2.
And the
number one.
number one. But really, the majority of the emotions, feelings, concern is the unknown as to what's going to happen with that number 7. Is that correct? Okay. Now, I don't know what that means, so it's good to have the data. Yeah.
If I can jump in to talk about a couple of these issues. In a lot of ways, Pandora is already out of her box in this area. And I think that's the best way to describe it. Specifically, if you look at number 8. Number 8 in the comp plan is medium density residential, if you can show that. It's constructed and zoned it's the housekeeping, so that one right there, and it's proposed to move to low density residential. That's on the ground.
Can you say that one more time?
Correct.
It's on, the homes that were built as low density residential, they're on the ground and they're built, but the comp plan has that area as medium density residential. So the zoning was changed.
The zoning was mixed use.
The zoning was mixed use. And so there's other areas where you have another change in number 9, high density residential, to low density residential. Those are on the ground too, correct?
Those are all housekeeping amendments where it's essentially part of the Mill Village neighborhood, and those are constructed today. But for the most part, it's built out. I mean, there's a few lots here and there. So you're correct.
So in a certain, I mean, on the ground today, we have a zoning that says this. So take number 1 and take number 7 out of it. On the ground today, in some cases, we have a zoning that says it's this, and we have a comp plan that says it's this, and they differ from each other, even though those structures are already on the ground. Accurate?
That's essentially accurate, but to confuse it a little bit more, Mill Village is part of a planned unit development, and so it's technically zoned PUD MU. The whole thing is. So you're technically correct, but I've heard a lot tonight. People are talking about zoning, and we're not talking about zoning. There are a couple changes where we're proposing changes to make the land use consistent with the zoning, and there's also instances where we're proposing changes to make the land use consistent with what's on the ground today. But what we're not talking about is changing zoning or keeping zoning. We're not having a zoning discussion at all. The only way zoning relates is in terms of consistency with the comprehensive plan land uses.
Councilmember Levison.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. You know, but actually, if you're looking at it as a land use, we've actually seen a lot of developers coming to us recently saying, you know, we don't really want to build as many units as medium density would allow us to build, so we want to really build what is the low density. But, you know, they don't find a reason to change the zoning. And so these housekeeping aspects are a little bit deceiving, because it's not that it could be built up to that density, but whoever chose to build there chose to build at a lower number of units per acre. And so to say that it's really housekeeping is really not true, because the capacity was always there, and we're just kind of after the fact changing the land use because that meets what the current reality is. It's not the reality that ever was there. Do you understand what I mean? Because they could always build up to that. The choice was made not to. And so they just basically gave up their excess capacity. And we're just maybe acknowledging it this way, but I don't know how you look at this as perhaps, you know, a trend. I mean, it probably happened quite a while ago, where there was just much more demand for low density. And so the builder could have built medium density, but chose not to because they were responding to a market need. Had the market need been more towards the end of medium density, they could have built in that little, you know, something above low density number of units per acre, but not to the maximum. Just like, you know, if you have high density residential, you could choose not to build the absolute capacity of what you could. So I think it's just reflecting more or less what were market influences back then, and we're just kind of doing something that's, you know, basically trying to, if somebody colored outside the lines, we're just expanding the lines so it looks like everybody colored within the lines. So I don't really see those housekeeping changes as something, you know, absolutely significant, but that just noting that people chose not to maximize the capacity for building units per acre. But I also feel that we may not have, I mean, I know there are some issues with Great Western Drive where it ends up on County Line Road 1. And in the discussion with the development of the Super Walmart there, that neighborhood was very patient in waiting for some kind of traffic light to go in that still hasn't gone in. And I really think that this neighborhood in particular has really worked with the city over so many years to try to be good neighbors and accommodate people. And then one other comment on the industrial or economic development. The other thing we know is everyone makes out what your worst case scenario could be is having a welding company starting up clanging at 7 a.m., but you could also have a charter school in that neighborhood.
Or a tasting room.
Well, or a tasting room, or you know, there are other uses in that spectrum that we don't have to mildly threaten people with worst case scenarios. And I always don't want to paint things like, well, accept this, or life could be much worse for you.
It's great because my microphone's on all the time. I wasn't saying life could be much worse, and so take it, just to be clear. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Aaron, thank you for the clarification and getting us back on point. We're talking about land use designations, not zoning. And I'm still open to, if anybody wants, you know, this isn't a make or break that wasn't a make or break motion. So there are things that I like and things that I don't like. But I mean, again, we asked for this. And getting back to the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan, doing a overhaul of the comprehensive plan does take time. It's not something that one just goes, hey, we're just going to start up the comprehensive plan. We're just going to do it today. Good plans take some time, and we had a small incident in September that kind of threw a monkey wrench in a bunch of that, and actually is going to cause quite a bit of, I'm assuming, a lot of changes in that comprehensive plan. Quite a bit. Again, getting back to land use designations, and I've said this before, lines on a map. I got hit with this on when we're talking about in the Southwest Transportation Plan. They are colors that can be changed if someone comes before council or actually before council, planning and zoning, and says, hey, we request a zoning change. It could fail. Even before it gets to council, it can be appealed to council. It can be passed to planning and zoning, gets to council. I get it, but this, again, we're talking about land use designations. I understand residents' concerns. I understand this isn't all about Mill Village, which it seems to be, it's turning out to be. I understand the LAEC's concerns regarding the properties there, but we do get some benefit, as you recall, if you go back to that table 1, as far as parks and open space. So, still having discussion.
Councilmember Christensen.
Can we not maybe move this forward and exclude 2 areas and just say we could exclude them for now and try to expedite examining those areas 1 and 7, which are the main ones under contention?
I get
asking.
Pardon?
Did you want to make a friendly amendment?
A friendly amendment. Okay, I'll make a friendly amendment.
We can exclude those 2. That's okay. Your mic's still on. Do you want to keep?
What?
Your mic's still on.
Oh.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I just have a question on number 1. It sounded like they could be potentially ready to build theirs in a short period of time. That's what I heard tonight. Is that true?
Just want to point out that they would still need to rezone the property.
Understand.
We have to come back through Planning Commission and do a complete rezoning on the property, but based on the vacancy rate in Longmont and the issue that Kathy expressed to us about the lack of housing, there's a need. I mean, it's in the front of the projects to go forward, but we'd still have to go through the process. And I'd say, I don't know, in a perfect world, 6 months, 9 months. I mean, it takes a while. We have to do plans, bring them back.
And one other question for you. So that basically that block around Concepts property to the north, it says proposed change number 2. Is that all part of this?
That's part of the same piece of property, yeah. And that's the philosophical difference of opinion that we have with the LAEC. Wendy explained to us that she's concerned that residential does not belong adjacent to economic development and it would preclude people from coming. It's our position that mixed use is a more appropriate land use and they can be compatible. So we respectfully disagree with your economic development department on that.
Thank you. So I do think that there are some merits both sides of the question on this, and it's one of those things that's kind of it is a decision council needs to make, and if we're going to move Longmont forward, we have to be able to make some changes along the way. So, I think even though I don't like that we don't have a strategic approach, I do think that we do need to have something on the map that says this is where we think we ought to be going.
Here's just going to jump in for a sec. So here's what hearing conversations off camera, so to speak. Here's what I would propose is we'll figure out how to do the friendly amendment later. But what about this? Okay, we approve all areas, but for 1 and 7. Okay, that's I think everybody agrees on, both behind the dais and out there. And then but then my thoughts on parcel 1, where I would disagree with Councilmember Christensen, is we're not the old Soviet bloc. You know, the outsiders don't necessarily get to come in and say, you know, we think you should use your land for this purpose. I understand where you're coming from, but if we've got property owners who want to sell it, we have builders who want to develop, and we also have property owners over there in Mill Village saying, don't build high density here, move it somewhere else, and we have someone willing to come in without anyone around that's going to be impacted, and we're going to be meeting that high density need. You know, I especially when we purchased all this open space as a city, you know, I just don't think it's fair to place the burden of holding out that hope of an economic industrial parcel to a private owner that wants to do something with their property that nobody cares at this point other than LAEC. So I'd also encourage us maybe to throw in that first parcel and let them proceed with their project, and then do what folks like Ms. Peck and some of the others said, and just say, okay, well, let's don't include that 7 parcel, and then as we move forward next year on the global Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan, that would become the appropriate time to look at that area. And so we keep that parcel as is and move forward in the area. And in the meantime, if somebody wants to build a worst case scenario business, well, we'll deal with it through the normal process, which would be with much pomp, fanfare, and debate. So my friendly amendment would be to just take out parcel 7 and approve it. Approve all, but for parcel 7, with the direction that it be looked at with the citywide Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan. So that is my motion for a friendly amendment. This is my first time doing this. I don't know if I need a second or you guys or what. So. And we've got the two. Yeah, there's still conversation. So. Right. I think. I thought you were next. Were you next?
No, I have.
She's the red. Okay, Councilmember Levison.
I'm next. I think one thing we're overlooking in all of this is someone from the public testimony indicated that when we were looking at the copper mill development and the first high density residential, that they failed to meet some of the criteria. There's no public transportation, and it doesn't meet some of the criteria that we have for high density residential in other parts of the city and philosophically. And I think that we have to be cognizant of including number 1 when we know that we can't provide the kind of services. And, you know, Walmart is not exactly the plethora of shopping that somebody at high density, you can't assume that they're all Walmart shoppers and exclusively Walmart shoppers. I think that that is a parcel that is going to be a critical piece, especially since I do remember Longmont Area Economic Council coming to the city and asking for a rail park. That area, you know, abuts the rail. So if we make these kind of changes, then we basically have flushed about a year's worth of work that LAEC did for the rail park issue. And, you know, that supposedly was something that was going to be one of those elements that was going to help Longmont attract rail-served businesses. So I think that we've got a little bit more of a conundrum when we're not really going to be able to meet the needs of a high-density residential on 20 acres. And how many units would that be on 20.8 acres for HDR?
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, Councilmember Levison, the density range is 12 to 30 units per acre.
Okay.
So,
yeah, 12 to 30 units per acre.
140.
So that could be quite significant.
I should note, just for clarification, that the locational criteria included in the comp plan are actually not part of the review criteria to do a land use change. They're used as a guide. So we did look at those when we took a look at evaluating these land uses, be it either low density or medium density on the old copper mill site or high density here. And certainly, you know, it's not a every property must meet every goal, policy, and strategy in the comp plan, but it is used as a guide.
Right, and if we're not going to really bother to use the guide, what would be the purpose to even have it in the code?
Now, Councilmember Christensen, you are red.
All right, I'm red. Okay, I'm trying to figure out about number one also, because on one hand, Avalanche told us specifically that we didn't have enough industrial land. On the other hand, this is the conundrum. We have both a lack of industrial space and we also have a lack of housing. So we have to increase both of those, and yet we're going to have to make a Hobbesian choice here. But if I'm not misunderstanding what Ms. Bronk said, what they want to develop is something that would really be a mixed residential and commercial.
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, Councilmember Christensen, we're not at the stage where we have a development plan from Urban West, I think is the. But
would that allow this?
Well, the changes that we've proposed on the map, again, these are land use changes, not zoning. Right. So change number one would be a change from industrial economic development to high-density residential. That would require a rezoning because that property is currently zoned business light industrial. Change number two is from medium density to industrial economic development, but that property would not require a rezoning because it's currently zoned business light industrial. So there would still be a mix of residential and industrial uses overall on the property. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So,
if I could add one item,
please.
Talking about if a property could come back, there is a provision in the code that if council denies land use change, that cannot come back before 1 year unless council expressly says otherwise. So that's just something to keep in mind as well.
So there was a friendly amendment suggested by a very friendly guy. Councilmember Santos and Councilmember Levison, what are your thoughts?
So can I ask you to officially accept or not accept the first one? Thank you.
Okay, so the mic wasn't on, but Councilmember Santos.
Mayor, we accept dropping number 7, accepting the rest.
Then with that, if there's no further discussion, debate, or comments, go ahead. What was that? Let's go ahead and vote. And she's in. Vote passes 5-1 with the mayor absent. All right. With that out of the way.
Councilmember Bagley.
Councilmember Finley.
I would like to know then what we're going to do with number 7 and how we should proceed.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, staff had anticipated that if changes that were passed that required rezonings, that council may want to direct staff to initiate those rezonings. That would be one option. Another option would be to let a property owner bring a rezoning forward. So that another option would be to, just do nothing, which I guess is always an option. But, I think that our intention was we don't want to continue to have instances on the comp plan. I mean, that's part of why we did some of these changes, is so that we wouldn't have land use and zoning that were inconsistent, because it does make it more difficult for a property to develop. So that may be something that you want to consider, is directing staff to bring back a rezoning on that property. Or again, it could be something that the property owner does in conjunction with the development. And again, we're talking about number 1. Oh, and you were talking about number 7, huh?
7.
Sorry. I'm going to blame it on the...
Hey, that's all right. We're all there. Aaron, you're the only one that, thank you for your guidance. So do we have a Councilmember Santos?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I guess my suggestion would be the ones that we know that we have to do, like for our own house, I guess. Is there a way that we can initiate those on our own and then notify the landowners that what has occurred here and let them initiate? It's a question. Or they all have to be initiated.
Councilmember Santos, there's only one that would require rezoning, and that's number 1. Number 7 doesn't require rezoning because nothing happened with it.
Then I would just then I would move that we direct staff just to notify the landowner of what has occurred here tonight and let them do what they need to do.
And in terms of number 7, I may defer to...
that was a motion, by the way.
Second. Although I think she heard. I mean...
Or can I get general consensus from council in that direction? Okay, fine.
Yeah, motion's in and second. Let's vote.
General consensus works. But I have a secondary comment.
All right, it passes. Go ahead and notify the landowners, and we'll go from there.
So just to actually answer the question that you actually asked versus the one that I answered originally, number 7, I think, and Eugene, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would deem that that's been denied. And so unless otherwise directed by council, that property would not be back before council within a year for a change.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, since it has been denied, it will be a year. I would expect that we would have at least some conversation when we look at the comprehensive plan eventually. And I'm expecting it will be next year when we look at the comprehensive plan, that number 7 will be back in, at least to be able for council and go through the process of the comprehensive plan update. That's what I'm expecting.
Councilmember Moore? Oh, you're not red. You turned it off? All right. All right. So I guess did they actually submit a request then officially to change the comprehensive plan?
Yes, I mean, we have a letter. It was done in conjunction. We're having some dialogue over here. The city is essentially the applicant on this. We initiated all the amendments. So I think what I'm seeing from Eugene is that essentially that not moving forward is in effect denial. So,
but it wasn't from the property owner, correct? So technically, if they wanted to come forward, I'm guessing it probably wouldn't preclude them from doing something within the year. Maybe their attorney should look at that, but anyway. Let's go on to the next one. I'm done with C. Is everyone else done with C? All right, let's go on to D.
Okay, the next item is ordinance 2014-38, a bill for an ordinance amending Title 15.04.030 of the Longmont Municipal Code on accessory uses regarding accessory dwelling uses and other uses. And again, this is Aaron Bostic to present this item.
Hi, Aaron.
Good evening,
Could you
Council.
please state your name and address for the record?
Aaron Fosdick, Planning and Development Services. So Tonight, I'm here to talk about proposed changes to the accessory use section. This was also pulled off the consent agenda on the 24th, so we did have a brief discussion and answered questions that were primarily related to accessory dwelling units. What I'd like to do is just kind of go over generally the proposed changes and then more specifically some of the changes that we made to specific sections, and then have questions. This is a public hearing item as well. So our proposed changes are basically, we have some general code cleanup, really removal of redundant or unimportant information, relocation of specific sections to improve readability. We're recommending removal of obsolete uses and regulations. So there's specific accessory uses that we're recommending being removed from the table. Fences, walls, signs, youth vendors, playhouses. Also removing additional regulations where appropriate for some of these uses that we're recommending being removed. We're recommending adding a definition for attached structure, and this is really to clarify and make it more consistent with the building code. This has been a source of confusion for a lot of people. I should have noted that, we're kind of going through a general code cleanup, so I think you'll be seeing code changes moving forward. Part of the reason for this is to make it more user-friendly, and really when we see that we're getting a lot of questions, comments, variance requests for certain things, it's a good indication for us that maybe we need to take a look at our code. So this is one of those instances. We've also recommended adding a setback from site distance triangle for all accessory uses, clarifying detached garage standards, which includes adding specific size criteria, and then recommending changes to the ADU section, accessory dwelling unit, home occupations, and adding some specific uses and regulations, and I'll discuss those in just a second. So again, the table of accessory uses, recommending removal of specific uses, kind of went through this, adding several uses associated regulations and definitions, and then combining some of the uses. So you'll see that in the code, and again, that's more just cleanup. So we are proposing to remove, you can see up here, proposed removal, fences, hedges, or walls, golf club houses, on-premise signs, outdoor sales with a youth vendor license, and playhouses. We're also proposing to add a few uses to the table: flagpoles, solar panels, windmills, and urban agriculture. Add those as permitted accessory uses. We have some changes, as I mentioned, proposed to specific accessory use regulations. So there's the table that tells you where you can do it, and then there's specific standards for some uses, and so we proposed some changes to these. For accessory dwelling units, we've recommended several changes. These include allowing accessory units to go through the site plan waiver process, and this is actually the case for all accessory uses. We're proposing to modify the size requirements, to add a setback standard for ADUs located in detached or attached structures, and also just kind of generally cleaning up this section. So we're suggesting that accessory units not have to go through the full site plan process, and really, again, this is for all accessory uses, not just ADUs. We're thinking that using our existing waiver process will be sufficient. In cases where it's not, the waiver process allows staff to then direct people to go through the full site plan review. So what we're finding is that oftentimes accessory uses may be minimal, or in the case of ADUs, someone wants to convert part of their basement. There's really no site changes. It's more making sure that people meet building code requirements. We can still check that density requirements are being met, but there's not a point of necessarily preparing, engineered documents and having it go through full-fledged DRC review, which is more lengthy in terms of time and more costly to an applicant. But we do want to reserve the right that in instances that there does need to be more of a full-fledged site plan, we could still direct those through the process. We're also proposing changes to the size standards. This is probably the biggest change. Currently, accessory units can be between 400 and 800 square feet, or 1/3 of the gross floor area of the principal unit. We've received feedback that these size requirements may not be sufficient and may not be in keeping with the times. So in terms of the minimum requirement, we're proposing that there not be a minimum requirement. Many of you may be familiar with the small house movement that's been occurring. We've had people that want to build smaller units. We've also had people that can't meet the 400 square foot requirement because their principal unit isn't at least 1,200 square feet. So if you have a house that's 1,000 feet, you can't build an ADU right now. Maximum size we're proposing to be half the gross floor area of the principal unit, which is consistent with accessory uses in general. And so that would change from the, current 800 square feet. We've also run into some issues with home occupations and our development code being inconsistent with the building code, so we're proposing some changes here. This is an effort to, again, make this section consistent, and we've suggested really splitting home occupations into uses that are primarily engaged in serving the public. So, for example, a hairstylist or chiropractor, masseuse, or those that are not engaged in serving the public, like a mail order company or a lawn service where you're going to people. You don't really have the public at your house. So those serving the public, we're recommending they would be approved if they're 15% or less of the gross floor area of the unit, which is what we have in our building code. Those not serving the public could continue at 50% of the gross floor area, which is what we have in the development code now. Other specific changes that we're recommending throughout the specific accessory section is removing parking standards, removing some additional regulations that were obsolete, and adding some specific use standards for those uses that we've added to the table, like flagpoles and windmills. So that was a quick overview. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I also should mention, because I'm about to forget, that Jeremy Tamlin and Don Burchett also worked on this, and they're available, particularly if you have questions related to the building code. Jeremy can answer those.
So if the answers are bad, it's their fault.
Correct.
That's what I heard. Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you for your work on that. I think most of these things are really, really very helpful, especially for, say, I live in Old Town, and my house is 950 square feet, and trying to get a garage built was a big challenge. And also home occupations. We have a lot of people who have home occupations, and we should be encouraging that. And I think these things really do encourage it and make it clarify it so that people don't become a problem for the neighbors, but we also allow people to make a living in their home. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Councilmember Levison.
Well, I think that there are some practical challenges to some of the changes that have been made. First of all, when I was going through the red line version that you so kindly sent me, thank you, I noticed that in the first section under accessory uses and structures, there was actually a part under the first that said that the owner or user had to be the same, that they couldn't be, I'd have to get my email out, but you had removed a section requiring an owner or an occupier be the same in the accessory use, as opposed to right now there wouldn't be the requirement for that. I know for accessory dwelling units there still is the requirement that the property owner has to occupy one of the units. But I also think there is a concern if someone builds or has an accessory use or structure that they actually have to have a clear tie to the property owner, that it has to be the property owner themselves or one of the tenants, because I could see in Old Town this could become a real nightmare if there wasn't some tie to the property owner. The other thing that causes me a lot of concern is waiving the requirement for the site plan. Many years ago, prior to being on council, I was the point person in Historic East Side neighborhood for reviewing development applications that came from within the neighborhood. And, we had a lot of people that were converting their basements without pulling a permit, and it was only if somebody called and saw people cutting through walls that we even knew what was going on. I think that it's going to be real difficult if somebody doesn't have to do a site review. That, for example, with RLE and Historic East Side, there is a maximum number of dwelling units per acre, and it's really hard to count. If you've met the maximum for blocks, if you just don't know if somebody's converted something previously because there's been no site plan review. And I think with the oddity in neighborhoods that don't have HOAs, a lot of the old neighborhoods, the lots are non-conforming and pretty odd. And I think sometimes the best way to add accessory structures is with the input of your neighbors and not get into a war, frankly, and having people take sides in a neighborhood is really counterproductive. The other part that I'm concerned about is that there was a minimum or a maximum when you had an accessory dwelling unit. That 400 square feet had a two-person limit. I know we have heard horror stories of residential owners having 6 adults living in a converted screen porch, and removing that maximum number of people and being 2 people in a unit that's very small, I think could do some real damage to the dynamic of the old neighborhoods. And I understand that the goal is that people want to live in smaller spaces. That's great, but I think the potential for abuse when there's not a site plan review and the neighbors have no idea what's going on is really going to cause more disruption. The other thing is to only require 1 parking space. If you have an unlimited number of people that could be living in one of the smaller units, to have no parking requirement with the way the driveways go. I mean, I have already heard that, there are people that like to be able to park their car. And we have also a requirement that you can't leave cars on the street for a certain number of hours consistently. So I'm concerned about a bunch of those things, but I'll let other people weigh in. I just also want to reinstate my concern that I think we should have done a little bit more to test drive this, to maybe, pick some examples of and we have several of proposals that never went through, to see whether or not this would have affected everything positively or negative.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Aaron, you on the slides there, did you remove parking requirements? Did I see that correctly? If you go back one, I think it was one slide back.
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, Councilmember Moore, I should have probably elaborated on that. We didn't wholesale remove parking requirements, but in some of the accessory uses that are non-residential, we've been contemplating changing parking requirements and moving from parking minimums to parking maximums. I don't want to give anything away of something that you guys are going to see at some point and something that Planning and Zoning Commission is looking at. But really, what we were finding is that in those non-residential uses, and I'll have to flip through and find some examples. Parking wasn't really anything that was ever an issue for the non-residential accessory uses. And so we felt that those would be better regulated in a parking section, however those changes come about, rather than having, if you're coming in to do something and we have a section in our code that's related to parking, that's probably where you'd go to find those requirements. You don't necessarily want to have to go to 13 different spots to say, oh, well, because I'm doing this, I need to check here. And so it's kind of a cleanup. There could be some additional changes that come with the code changes we're recommending for parking, but we're not recommending getting rid of them for accessory dwelling units.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a couple questions. So applying this to me, okay? So if my neighbor has a garage that's attached to his house, is he automatically allowed to do any of this by right if he just wants to?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so let's suppose my neighbor, one of my best friends, decides that he wants to build a windmill, okay, which is allowed for whatever reason. I mean, assuming it's electricity, but for whatever reason, he wants to build a windmill. is there any type of oversight, regulation, or is it a use by right issue where, hey, it's not as big, does this allow anyone to build a windmill without going to their neighbors and getting their input?
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, for accessory uses and structures throughout, you don't need to get your neighbor's permission, typically. There are height standards and setback standards that any structure still needs to meet. So, for example, if your neighbor came and wanted to build a windmill that was 70 feet tall, that would need to go for a variance. And then you as a property owner would be notified. That would come to Planning and Zoning Commission for a height variance. So there's process if it's above and beyond what's contemplated in the code. But if something meets the height requirements, it meets setback standards, if there's a permit needed, they get a permit. That's essentially an accessory use by right.
Okay, so as long as they meet the requirements, they can build, they can put a boathouse on their lot, or they can build a windmill, or no review, use by right. That's what I'm hearing.
No, I don't think if someone wanted to build a boathouse, that would be an accessory structure. There's size requirements that they would need to meet. There's setback requirements. Certainly, if it's over the threshold of square footage, they would need to get a building permit. So, can they do it? Probably, if they're within in the code. Can they do it with no oversight? Probably not.
Okay, so what we're doing is cleaning it up and then adding 4, correct?
That is correct.
And those were again?
Solar panels, windmills, flagpoles, and urban agriculture.
Okay, it's the windmills that worry me. But the question I have on nothing against my ancestors. Yes, the Dutch people are welcome in Longmont. And Councilmember Levison, her comments. Is there any way to add a potential, review process to this?
So if I could maybe address a couple of the comments that were made, and tell me if I missed anything, but in relation to the owner comment, we did strike that for in the general standards. It's still there for the accessory dwelling unit, because I think it is important for the character of the neighborhood to have the owner either living in the principal unit or the accessory dwelling unit, so that you don't have a neighborhood that's increasing in density and just primarily renters. So that is still there. We didn't feel, since there is the requirement that they have to be located on the same property, we haven't really seen a lot of issues with someone selling a shed to someone, for example.
Not now.
In terms of your comments related to site plan review, and particularly in the RMD and RLE zones, where I know historically density has been an issue, density is still needs to be looked at, and particularly in those neighborhoods, in order for anyone to get a permit to do an accessory unit, we do have counts by block, every block, and we do monitor that. So anytime someone comes in, either to, maybe there's a vacant lot and they want to build a duplex, maybe they want to scrape their house and build a fourplex, or they want to do an ADU, we do check that block density, and there's a notice on every single address in our permitting system that says check with planning staff before approving this. So we do still have that mechanism built in, and are not going to be approving ADUs that would put a block over its density. For those of you who may not know, zoning in those districts has a cap, a density cap. So, there is still the mechanism for that review. There's also still the mechanism for sending things through site plan review. So certainly someone can request a waiver, and it's very possible that they would, and it's also, in some cases, it makes sense. We don't want to necessarily have someone do a full-fledged site plan to build a small shed. We may want to have them do a site plan to build a new detached garage with an accessory unit above it. There's going to be maybe some utility considerations, some parking considerations, just general things that we'd want to look at through the site plan process. So I think in those instances, we still reserve the right to basically deny someone's waiver and send them through the full-fledged site plan review. It's not that if you request a waiver, it's automatic that you get it. So those can be denied and you need to go through site plan review. They can be conditionally approved based on certain things. So we do still have some ability with those. And I don't remember if there was any additional items to speak to.
Yeah, Councilmember Levinson, well, you're
Thank
still
you.
red. I thought you were.
No, I just turned
guess
it right
that's true.
on.
That's true.
I just
All
turned
right,
it on.
Councilmember Levinson.
I guess I do still have an issue with having any accessory use that doesn't have a relationship to the property owner. And especially with some of, when I was reviewing it, you can actually have a structure for an accessory use built before a house, for example, in the way I read it, because you can't build an accessory dwelling unit before the primary residence, but it does say you could build a structure for accessory use before something else on the property. And I am also concerned about removing the maximum occupancy for an accessory dwelling unit, because we have had incredible abuses. And also to maintain, I know that the parking was 1 space, 1.5 spaces per bedroom, per bathroom, whatever. But I really think that we need to look at the parking issue, because if you have 3 adults living in one of these small units, you're going to have 3 cars. And so, you know, that could be an on-street, partially on-street and off-street combination.
So first, to address the accessory use before, that's not allowed, and that's, you have to have the principal use before you have the accessory use. In terms of the number of people, you know, that's not something that we've evaluated during our site plan review, and frankly, that's difficult to enforce. So one of the pieces that we went through with these updates is talking with code enforcement, and we did hear from them on several things that there are certain things that are really difficult to enforce. So I don't really think that we ask people how many people are going to be living in this unit. And the other piece is if we do have a unit that, you know, maybe someone has a 3,000 square foot principal unit and they want to build a 1,000 square foot dwelling unit, you know, we determined that that may be appropriate for someone to, you know, maybe a family of 3 to live in there. So that's partially it's because it's a little bit unenforceable, but also with the change in size requirement, it may be available, you know, it may be more attractive for larger family, you know, maybe 3 versus 2. I don't think that, you know, some of the situations that you've described with basements or porches, or those wouldn't be considered accessory dwelling units, so they don't fall under this. If someone does a basement finish and they don't pull permits for that, that's illegal. And, you know, if we find out about that, we would obviously, you know, go out there and stop that and ensure that they get permits and are doing things to code. But those aren't instances in many cases where there are accessory units. I mean, just to give you an example of kind of the scope of what we're talking about, since about 2000, so say for the last 14 years, we've had a total of 45 accessory units that have been either permitted or CO'd, so they're either in some stage of being built or have been built and are being lived in, and 37 of those are in Prospect, where it's planned. You know, the development plan specified that accessory units could go on these lots. So really that doesn't leave a whole ton of other units that have been built. Some of those are in Old Town, some of them are in other parts of town, some of those are in separate structures, some of those are in basements, but really I think the phenomena that you're describing where people are finishing their basements, that's really just a basement finish and a roommate situation, which I think we talked a little bit about last time. So building inspection is keenly aware of making sure that that differentiation is noticed when people bring in plans. Because again, as we mentioned last time, there's some different requirements to have a separate ADU than there would be to just finish your basement and let, you know, your daughter-in-law and your son move in or something like that.
Well, and don't we still have requirements of how many unrelated people can, you know, basically the rooming house situation?
That is correct. There,
Yeah.
I think it's 5.
So we do still have some limits. You know, a couple other points. I don't know if Councilmember Bagley lives in an HOA, but if you do live in an HOA, they take a look at anything you do because it's part of your covenants. Is that correct? I mean, most HOAs have those requirements.
We do not enforce covenants,
Right.
but you are correct that in some cases, covenants may be much more restrictive than our development code. And so that's really, we do try to tell, and building inspection tells property owners all the time, you should check with your HOA. I mean, home occupations is a big one, signage, landscape. I mean, there may be things that we allow that your HOA may say no way. And again, we don't enforce that, but I'm guessing your HOA might.
Right. So really the place where we're going to see the most effect of this code change is going to be on HOA neighborhoods, which are, most of the older structures.
I mean, I can't speak to what the covenants are in each HOA. Some are very strict. Some require a letter be submitted with a building permit giving approval. Others may sort of have an HOA, but they don't really have rule. I mean, we don't enforce that. We don't review that, so I can't really speak to
Well,
that.
and I guess with the proposed change and Councilmember Bagley's comments about, wanting to put up a windmill, I think that, again, I'll reinstate my comment from a few weeks ago, is that I think we really should have test-driven this at neighborhood group leaders to let people know that they might possibly have people looking at flagpoles, solar panels, windmills, and urban agriculture as part of what they want to do with their property. So
I did talk to John Clark,
Yeah.
who runs the NGLA as a staff liaison, and he did indicate that NGLA is not necessarily interested in, they're not a recommending body in the same way that Planning and Zoning Commission is. And so really, what might make the most sense at this point, they're not really interested in providing recommendations in that way. But I think certainly as we roll out this code change, whatever council decides to approve, and as we roll out additional code changes, this fall when the NGLA reconvenes, I think it would maybe make sense to inform them about some of the changes and some of the things that they may be seeing. So that's certainly something that we've talked about with John's group.
Great, thanks.
All right, let's go ahead and do we have a motion? Public hearing, yes, it's been a while. Yes, public hearing. There's nobody on the list. Anybody have anything they want to say or add? Come on up. Richard. If you could state your name and address for the record.
My name is Richard Showers. I live at 601 Collier Street, and I'm in the Henna neighborhood, and I agree with Sarah. It would be nice to test drive this first a little bit before you pass it. There's a couple of issues that were mentioned that sound like they could really seriously impact the whole of Longmont. If I'm in a 1,500 square foot dwelling and I live next to a 3,200 foot dwelling, and they want to put a 1,600 foot dwelling on their property, it can overshadow my property, and I feel a little bit more trapped, and I couldn't enjoy my neighborhood. And then limiting the number of occupants in those dwellings too. I think that there's a lot of issues that could come up around this, and before you say yes to it, I think that the neighborhood leaders, even though they don't take a position, I'm with people from our neighborhood right now who are here because we're concerned about this, and it would be nice to just postpone it, let us get a little bit more involved if we can, let the other neighborhood group leaders get involved, and let's have a dialogue about it. Thank you.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Bagley. I would move passage of ordinance 2014-38.
Are there any other public comments first? All right, that's closed. Do we have a second? Second. Okay. Additional comments, questions? I guess I'm still concerned about the windmills. Meaning that I just don't want to. Yeah, at some point, someone's going to be standing behind that podium going, what council member voted to allow my neighbor to build a windmill? It's keeping me up all night. So I guess I've never heard of windmills inside the city. and I'm hesitant to vote for it. I guess that's really what it comes down to. I don't like the windmill idea because there's a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, even though that I can understand. I just can imagine this just somebody deciding to build a windmill and somebody getting really upset. That's the only thing that I don't like about it. And so I guess I'd want that removed. It's all okay except for the windmills. Just my thought. Yeah, Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I just moved it for more discussion, so we can have more discussion. I guess some of the discussion that was had ahead of time, and I had to get up just to move because it was going on, is some of those questions could have been asked ahead of time, and general questions could have been asked here. And I understand that there are some questions that need to be asked. And we had this discussion 2 weeks ago, and some of the same things were brought up again and again. And in hearing them, I guess my time's up. So I'll stop talking. But just getting berated over the head with them again and again is not productive for a productive meeting. I do understand, especially when some of the examples that were given to staff weren't really valid. I don't I'm just trying to understand, and I get the windmills. I understand the windmills. I do have some concern with urban agriculture, especially if livestock. And if you live in an HOA, as I do, you can't have certain things. But if you don't live in an HOA area, you can have 6 chickens with setbacks. Ben's still here. Ben is not here. There are folks that have come to council who had issues, whether it was a garage or a setback of a building, and they've worked out their issues. That will still occur. So I don't see, except for the erroneous exaggerations that was given to staff, and that wasn't accurate. I don't see what the hubbub is about.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Bagley. The height of the windmill shall not exceed the maximum structure height for the zoning district in which they are located. And I believe you do live in an HOA, and they would not allow a windmill. So I think you're safe.
Thank you. You know what? I'll sleep better. Thank you, Councilmember Finley. There's a motion. Should we vote? Yes, Mr. Burchett.
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, I just want to clarify. Currently, if someone were to come in and request to do a windmill, they would be allowed currently. This clarifies, yes.
We need to relook at the code.
Along with the solar panels, along with a flagpole. So what we're trying to do is we're clarifying this to make sure that everybody understands the rules so that it's clear.
Got it. So it's too late.
So currently, they would be allowed. And there are different kinds than the ones we see on the plains. So.
Call me the little Dutch boy. Let's vote. And it passes with Councilmember Levison a no vote and the mayor absent. Let's go on to E.
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, your next item is ordinance 2014-39, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the city to lease the real property known as Vans Run Municipal Airport Hangar Parcel H32, the premises to Norman R. Morris, tenant, and we do not have a staff presentation on this item.
I'm taking a gamble, guessing that we don't have any comments or questions, but let's go ahead and have our public invited to be heard. Public hearing portion. Anybody? No, unless there's comments or questions. Let's go ahead and vote. Actually, we need a motion. Councilmember Christensen.
Could we know what interest Mr. Morse has in aviation?
Pardon?
Welcome, Mr. Barr, our beloved airport manager.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, Councilmember Christensen. Mr. Morris is a plane owner. He's recently relocating to the area to be closer to his daughter who's going to CSU.
Do we have a motion? Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Bagley. I'd like to move ordinance O 2014-39.
I'll second that one. If there's no further debate, let's vote. All right, it passes unanimously with the mayor absent. F.
This is a public hearing and presentation of recommended budget categories for the 2015 CDBG Home and Affordable Housing Fund programs, and Kathy Fedler will present this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Kathy Fedler, CDBG Coordinator. So we're here tonight to present to you the proposed budget set-asides in the housing, economic, and community reinvestment areas for 2015 Community Development Block Grant, Home, and Affordable Housing Programs. These are the recommendations of the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board, and they are recommending full funding based on 2014 as opposed to doing a budget cut, which is what we normally do, but then we don't get the budget cut. So we decided to cut to the chase, and probably this year we'll get a budget cut. So if we do, we will not do that again. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and anticipate full funding, and we will come back to you once we take applications and make some recommendations for funding with recommendations for lesser funding and more funding, just to be on the safe side both ways. The proposed budget allows for competitive funding to be made available for nonprofit capital improvement programs, continues funding for emergency assistance and housing counseling, allows for some funding for competitive housing project applications, and sets aside funding if the Section 108 loan guarantee application that we've been talking about for a little while is submitted, approved, and repayment is decided and determined to be coming from the CDBG fund. So this is a worst case scenario, if you will, or a safe scenario, so that those funds are set aside if needed. If we go in a different direction, then obviously we can reallocate those funds at that point in time. It does not recommend a recapitalization of the neighborhood revitalization program, as the Midtown area is virtually complete once we finish up a couple of projects that are still on the books with 2013 and 2014 funding. And until another neighborhood has been identified or chosen. And then the proposed budget also does not recapitalize the Small Business Loan Fund. We looked at this program with the Colorado Enterprise Fund, which is the nonprofit that we contract with to administer that program. And we all were in agreement that we are close to $1 million capital investment in that between the two entities, and that the program income that's being generated through loan payments should keep that fund operational for a number of years. We can keep an eye on it and make adjustments in future years. I did lay out the percentages of the CDBG budget that we will be proposing. Obviously, the home budget is all affordable housing, and then the Affordable Housing Fund budget is also all for affordable housing. We are, again, recommending that we only put forth funding opportunities from the program income. So the loan payments that are generated on an annual basis, so we would be making that available for competitive applications and not dipping into the capital of that fund until we get some direction at the end of this month on the Workforce Housing Task Force recommendations that we'll be bringing back to you. The advisory board did feel it was important to provide as much funding as possible to support affordable housing projects because of the critical need for rental housing affordable to households at or below 50% AMI, as described in the task force's recommendations. So this would allow about $496,000 to be made available on a competitive basis, which is a little less than half of the $1 million recommended by that task force. And again, we'll be bringing some information back on that at the end of the month. The advisory board did want me to be sure and include that they were very concerned about dedicating 1/3 of the CDBG funding every year for 20 years for the 150 Main Street project, so the Section 108 loan fund, without receiving any affordable housing units from the project when they're so desperately needed. And they did want to urge council to ensure some of the affordable, some of the housing units be affordable in that project if that's possible, and or would request that council identify another source of funding for some or all of the 108 loan payments so these funds could continue to be used for other affordable housing projects each year. I do want to point out that about $1.6 million in other federal, state, and local funding is expected to be generated from the total of $822,000 in federal funding, and that's based on past information, that past averages. Sorry. Not thinking straight tonight. And then also I did want to point out that if this is approved tonight as shown, that we would be putting applications out probably early next week with applications due by August 15th. If you remember, the Affordable Housing Technical Review Group then reviews all housing applications and would make a recommendation for funding to the advisory board by their September 11th meeting. That advisory board would hold a public hearing, hear presentations, and determine their funding recommendations at that same meeting, and that you would be receiving those recommendations at the October 14th meeting, at which time another public hearing would be held. And then the draft action plan for 2015 would be distributed for a required 30-day comment period in November. And then you would get another final approval at the end of November meeting, which would also be a public hearing, with final submission to HUD of the action plan before the end of the year. So I would be happy to answer any questions that you have, or you can hold the public hearing.
I guess I have a question. That question was, they're concerned. How do we address that? I heard the concern, but okay, now what? What are your recommendations?
So that is for council to decide, and we were very clear that it's your decision. They just wanted it known that they had a concern about that they were concerned that there wasn't affordable housing in the project for the use of the funds that would be ongoing for the next 20 years, or that there should be some serious look at another funding source to repay the fund if there wasn't going to be affordable housing provided on site.
And remind us one more time about the 150 Main Street project.
So right now that is projected to be a mixed-use project. It would have ultimately about 500 rental units, I think, 250 in the first phase, and then some commercial development as well, and some is not tied down yet, but it would be a mix of rental and at this point maybe some for sale housing at the very last phase.
And just to make sure everybody's on the same page, it is the Butterball project.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. I was like, I didn't want to seem stupid, but I'm like, when in the world did we approve affordable housing? Okay, Butterball project. That makes sense.
This would be specifically the 108 would go towards the demolition of that project, and it would not be under the affordable housing criteria the way our consultant that you all hired a few meetings ago. It looks like they're going to recommend that be under the economic development national criteria, not necessarily the housing. So it does meet that national criteria.
And so this money that they're concerned about, what is that specifically being used for?
So the 108 loan would go to demolish the Butterball plant.
So when it says dedicating dedicating 1/3 of all CDBG funds for the next 20 years.
So it's a loan from HUD to the city, We would give it to the developer to demolish the building, and then that loan has to be repaid. So right now, what's being talked about is that the repayment would come from the CDBG fund. This would be the amortized payment over 20 years at the interest rate that it currently is at in order to fully repay the loan.
And Mayor Pro Tem, Council, one thing that we do want to point out is that certainly there will be a reduction because of that loan payment in total CDBG expenditures that we can do every year. However, we have been, as Kathy mentioned, we have been capitalizing the Colorado Enterprise Fund that's now almost to $1 million every year with these same funds. So that has not been going towards affordable housing. It's been going towards economic development. So while not all of this $185,000, I think is the repayment, would have been in the last several years going to CEF for the Colorado Enterprise Fund, a portion of that has been already dedicated to economic development. So we're not shifting everything from away from affordable housing because we've already been investing through another means in economic development.
That clarifies it immensely. Thank you.
In addition, as we discussed when the developer was here and we a few meetings ago, this is a placeholder in the budget. Council is not authorizing that expenditure. Similar to the mall project, we would have to bring back a redevelopment agreement that the council would have to act on in order to move in that direction. So this is not saying we're moving forward with it. It's a budget placeholder. There will be additional actions that will be required by council.
Okay, yeah, crystal clear now. Thank you. No more worries. Any other Councilmember Levison?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Kathy, I couldn't track down the email, but I did get an email alert recently, I think from National League of Cities or a contact I have in HUD, with the consideration that the home program will be radically cut in the coming years. And I couldn't dig that out in time to send it to you for this meeting, but I will. So if something untoward happens to the home budget or in future years, CDBG, my understanding is the Section 108 loan payment, if we only have $180,000 in a CDBG budget, the city would have to fund that, any gap, to pay back the loan. Is that correct?
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley and Councilmember Levison, as Harold indicated, the agreement that would come forward if we move forward with the 108 is going to have redundancy after redundancy. So this may be how we would choose to repay that loan, but it's going to have to be collateralized, and there's going to have to be another backup source of funding because the CDBG fund program could be cut and then not be eligible, for repayment. So there will have to be another identified source of funds that go to it, or some type of collateral that could be clawed back if the CDBG program is not funded.
So what kind of, I don't know if you could give an example, what kind of, so basically we have to have the funds to anticipate worst case scenario somewhere stashed in the city budget.
We have to have another funding source that would back up in case CDBG is not cut. And keep in mind, we are not voting on the Section 108 loan tonight.
Right.
We're simply putting it as a placeholder in the budget in case you do decide to fund that or authorize us to apply for that in the future.
I just have serious concerns about, I understand that we've been using some of the money for economic development, but the way we've been using the money is actually starting businesses and grassroots businesses and people adding equipment so they hire more people. And that's the kind of economic development aspect of CDBG that I think was really envisioned when we all know how desperately people need some job development too. And I know that it's been, used in the demolition aspect before, but I've also seen the projects where there has been affordability and target of benefits to those people earning that CDBG type wage. And I don't really see that here. So I just wanted to make sure we discuss those things publicly.
Well, Go ahead. I was just going to say, as Sean indicated, if we do go forward with the 108, what we're looking at now is a job creation. So there would be jobs that would have to be created, a certain number, a very specific number that would be part of the agreement, and they would have to create those and show that they have done that. So there would still be job creation in some form.
And I think we also hear the concern for affordable housing, and I can say that I have had those conversations, and so it's definitely something that we're going to continue as we look at potentially bringing something back to council. Obviously, the financial due diligence is going to have to occur, and understand what happens if it is cut and how we're going to respond to that, and all of that will be brought to council if and when we pull all of that together. So there's just a lot of work left to do on this as we're putting it together, and we definitely hear what folks are saying and are communicating that to the developer.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So the Section 108 loan that is being considered would be the maximum loan amount we could receive. Is that what my understanding is?
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley and Councilmember Moore, so I'm trying to remember if I put this I believe I did put this at the full amount that we could potentially borrow, so it's 5 times our grant amount. So I just assumed that we would be doing that, and this is the repayment tied to that. Now, if the developer only borrows part of it and we don't use all of it, or we choose to only go for part of it and not for all of it, then there would be a lesser amount that would be dedicated.
Thank you.
Part of that question is also looking at other eligible projects that may or may not need to be undertaken, or where there's opportunities. And so it may be that a portion of it could be used for this, and another portion could be used for a different housing project. And it's, again, evaluating the financials to really see what's ready to go. And I think part of this is also going to correspond with CDB GDR requests that we're putting in and how we can leverage those funds. And so this is the worst case scenario, to say this is what it looks like, but it could be another project separate and apart from the 150 Main project.
And if I could add to that, Kathy's being very financially prudent in putting the full amount in the budget, but we already know that the developer's estimate of cost to demolish is less than what the full amount would need to be. So we know that there is going to be capacity. But what it does, by her putting the full amount, is, as Harold said, allows us to maybe do an affordable housing project in another part of town. Or in the vicinity, but we would not have to use that full amount unless you all choose to when we bring the application for Section 108 to you.
Time for the public hearing. If there's no other comments, anyone from the public who wants to speak on this issue? And with that, let's vote. Actually, we need a motion. Councilmember Finley, please help.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you.
I move that we approve the recommendations of the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board.
Second. And we have a motion and a second. Let's vote. And it passes unanimously with the mayor absent.
Great, thank you.
Let's go ahead. What are we on here? I guess we are on the consent agenda. Thank you.
Item 9A is Ordinance 2014-40, a bill for an ordinance approving a land use amendment to the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan for the Lower Clover Basin Neighborhood Park and school sites generally located west of Airport Road and south of Clover Basin Drive. And Fourth Amendment to the agreement in furtherance of annexation for the Duval property of the Weibel-Duval annexation to the city of Longmont. Public hearing and second reading is scheduled for July 22nd. Item 9B is Resolution 2014-61, a resolution authorizing the execution and delivery of a pledge agreement with the Twin Peaks Metropolitan District. Item 9C is Resolution 2014-62, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City and State Board of the Great Outdoors Colorado Trust Fund. Oh, excuse me, that one we pulled from the agenda. I'm sorry. Item 9D is Resolution 2014-63, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and Boulder County for repair and remediation of the Peschel property from flooding. Item 9E is a resolution approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and City of Boulder as the lead agency for the Boulder County Broomfield County Home Consortium for a subrecipient agreement for home funds. Item 9F is approved capital improvement amendments T12 Van Sprand Airport improvements. We do need to pull items B and D for staff presentations, and then item C was pulled completely from the agenda already.
Councilmember Levison, or I'm sorry, Finley.
We do look a little alike.
You do. You're about the same distance.
I would move the consent agenda minus B, C, and D.
Councilmember Levison.
I'd like to remove A for a couple of questions, please.
Okay, she says. So I'll second it with that friendly amendment. Let's go ahead and vote. And it passes unanimously with the mayor absent.
The first item is ordinance 2014-40, and Ava Pahachevsky is here to address questions.
Councilmember Levison, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Ava, I just had a couple of questions. I read through the information and looking at maps and everything. I had specific questions around the park issue, knowing that we might have Portico neighborhood coming into the city. I'm wondering whether or not, when we're looking at what the other potential neighborhoods that would be using a neighborhood park, whether or not we need to have enough capacity and not just at the bare minimum standard for a neighborhood park.
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, Councilmember Levison, Ava Pahajevsky, Planning and Development Services. The Portico Development has not filed a formal application. Therefore, we have not sent referral materials to the St. Vrain Valley School District. Brian Kragerud is here tonight from St. Vrain Valley School District. I don't know if Brian has any thoughts about it, but again, they have not analyzed it because this is not a formal application.
Actually, my question was for the neighborhood park specifically.
I understand that, but you're talking about population data, and I don't think that the school district has incorporated that because it's not part of City of Longmont.
So let me kind of jump in and talk about this. So in terms of the future development in that area, in the Parks and Rec Master Plan, there's actually two proposed parks in that plan. There's P7 and P8. I believe P7 is the South Clover Basin site, which is the one that's in question. P8 is the West Grange site, which is northwest of that location. So there's two parks that are in proposed development in that area.
Councilmember Levison, I apologize. It's way past my bedtime. You were talking about a park, and I'm rambling on about a school, so I apologize.
But I also have a school question as well. I'm just wondering whether, my second question is whether or not we can get some data on the parcels that are not yet built but might have development applications coming in west of Silver Creek High School in that west, I think it's called West Grange neighborhood. And I don't remember where I read it, but I remember reading something recently about maybe having some additional density in certain areas, and I'm just wondering if we can't get a big picture on what the dynamics could be. Say, for example, we have a developer saying they don't want to do low-density residential anymore, but hearing the need over and over that we need high-density residential, that they want to put 1,000 apartments that are 2 and 3 bedrooms. And, what the, trends and assumptions are. And I understand that sometimes we think that, those kind of housing units don't come with children or young children. I think that might be changing. But I'd like to see whether or not there's a bigger picture of information we can get from the school district around school capacity issues before we look at giving up the school site as part of this annexation change. And I think Ryan's going to come down to the podium so you don't have to field that.
Okay, thank you. And also, I just wanted to point out, we also have Paula Fitzgerald here to address your parks question. I apologize.
If I may, before he gets up there, in addition, we also have Dry Creek Park in the area and Blue Skies Park in that area as well.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Mr. Bagley and members of council. My name is Ryan Krager, and I'm with San Bruno Valley School District. So to answer your question, Councilman Levelson, yes, we have taken a broad look at the southwest area of Longmont as well as Boulder County in the general area of this development. For a long time, the district has had a conversation ongoing at staff level about whether or not this would be a viable site. And through reviewing the data, and basically what the data that we look at are essentially birth data, housing development, and then we look at the number of students that are currently at the elementary schools in the area. And after taking a look at all of that, we also took a look at the land uses that are currently in the area. So when the Somerset school was put onto the land on the LACP, there was a lot less Boulder County open space on our western frontier, if you will, of Longmont. And so I think the thinking then was there would be more development in the southwest area towards Niwot that would make this school site more viable. That has not proven to be the case. We have mostly open space in the Boulder County area. There's not a lot of development that is currently planned for that area or that even could happen. Within the southwest corner of Longmont, being the Clover Basin neighborhood, we took a look at the current number of units that were built. We took a look at the number of units that were planned, so West Range, and then the other developments within Renaissance, the Somerset, and other ones south of there. So essentially, in taking a look at Blue Mountain, specifically its attendance area, there are about 946 units that could still be built within that attendance area, which is probably where, if there was a school built at the Somerset site, that is where those students would probably come from. We'd be alleviating something at Blue Mountain or something at Eagle Crest. But Eagle Crest's attendance area is pretty stable, and it has a very good mix of students already within it, and I don't think changing that one would make a whole lot of sense. So of this 946 units that we looked at, that would yield approximately 202 students for the area in southwest Longmont. And that's taking into consideration if every single home that's built is a single family home. I know that in West Grange there's, it was originally planned as a mixed use neighborhood with a town center and all those wonderful things with high density residential, medium, and also what's being built today was the low density residential. West Grange is following a pattern of a lot of development, not just within Longmont, but across the school district, of building low-density residential without building a lot of the multifamily stuff like you were talking about earlier this evening. If they were in your example to build high-density residential, that would further impact the total number of students, as multifamily historically has had a much lower student yield by housing type over our other ones. The bread and butter for opening a school is essentially single-family detached housing in that price point of $250,000 to $350,000. Those are your homes where people are either moving up or it's their first-time home buying opportunity, and they tend to have families when they move in, or they're moving up because they need more space. And in southwest Longmont and in the area over here, There are some homes that are in that price point, but they tend to be the Kingsbridge neighborhood with attached townhomes and those sorts of things. So the price point within Southwest Longmont, I think, is elevating at a higher or faster rate than in other areas of Longmont and so forth. So taking all that into consideration, that played into our study of Southwest Longmont, and we worked with planning staff here as well to say that we don't think that Somerset is a viable site any longer. And so we think that from the district's perspective, we can accommodate those students through those student yields that I mentioned with additions to Blue Mountain as well as Eagle Crest. And we have done that in other areas of the district because Blue Mountain, Eagle Crest, Fall River, and then Black Rock in Erie are all the same model. We built the same elementary school in all different areas and so forth as kind of an economy of scale. Currently down in Blue Mountain, or Black Hawk, we have an addition on that school to increase the capacity of that school. And we think we can take that lesson that we learned there and apply it to the two schools in Southwest Longmont to make better use of the taxpayers' funds, as well as making room for the additional students.
And then I guess that the other two fiddlings that you could do is restricting open enrollment at those two schools, and then perhaps redrawing boundary lines because there's additional capacity that's unmet that is lower at Indian Peaks and Sunset. So you could actually redistrict part of a neighborhood.
Yeah, kind of what you're citing is the benchmark